What happens when a single father's carefully controlled world collides with his boss in the ocean, and she whispers the four words that change everything? I'm Ethan Brooks, and this is the story of how one company beach retreat shattered every boundary I thought I understood. Stay with me until the end, hit that like button, and comment what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The sun hadn't even reached its peak when I realized this retreat was going to be a disaster. Not the catastrophic, career-ending kind of disaster I'd feared when the invitation landed on my desk 3 weeks ago. No, this was worse. This was the slow-burning, creeping under your skin kind of disaster that starts with good intentions and ends with you questioning every decision that led you to this exact moment. Standing on the white sand of Crescent Bay Resort, watching my 7-year-old daughter Lily chase seagulls with an enthusiasm that threatened to exhaust me just by observation, I felt the familiar weight of single parenthood settle across my shoulders like a weighted blanket. Around me, my colleagues from Morrison and Associates were already 3 drinks deep into their Friday afternoon, their laughter carrying across the beach with the kind of abandon that only comes from knowing your weekends don't involve bedtime negotiations and breakfast prep. "Daddy, look! That one has a French fry." Lily's voice pierced through my thoughts, high and bright and completely unconcerned with the fact that I'd been awake since 5:30 that morning, packing sunscreen and swim diapers and enough snacks to sustain a small army. "That's great, sweetheart. Just don't get too close to the water without me, okay?" She waved dismissively, already pursuing her next target. I'd brought her because I had no choice. My sister, my usual lifeline, was in Portland for a wedding, and the babysitter I'd lined up had come down with strep throat 48 hours before departure. The company had been understanding, even enthusiastic about it. "Family friendly," the invitation had proclaimed in cheerful sans serif font. "Bring your loved ones." What they didn't mention was that family-friendly still meant an open bar starting at noon, a volleyball tournament that had already resulted in one twisted ankle and a general atmosphere of professional boundaries dissolving like sugar in hot tea. I was adjusting the beach umbrella I'd staked into the sand, my little island of responsibility in a sea of tequila sunrises, when I heard her voice. "You came prepared." I turned, and there was Clare Morgan, standing at the edge of my shade, with a smile that seemed both amused and something else I couldn't quite identify. Approval, maybe, or curiosity. My boss, the CEO of Morrison and Associates, the woman whose signature determined my salary, whose approval shaped my career trajectory, whose presence in any room seemed to straighten spines and sharpen focus. Except here, now, she looked different. It wasn't just the obvious. The fact that instead of her usual impeccable suits, she wore a simple white cover-up over what I tried very hard not to notice was a navy blue bikini. It wasn't even the way her dark hair, usually pulled back in that severe bun, fell loose around her shoulders in waves I'd never seen before. It was something in her posture, a softness, an ease that never appeared in the office, where Clare Morgan was all sharp edges and sharper decisions. "Force of habit," I said, gesturing to my setup. Umbrella, beach bag containing 3 types of sunscreen, arranged by SPF, a small cooler with water bottles and juice boxes, a first aid kit because you never knew. When you're responsible for someone else's survival, you plan for contingencies. "Lily, right?" She nodded toward my daughter, who had apparently given up on seagulls and was now constructing what appeared to be an elaborate sand fortress. "She's beautiful. She has your eyes." The compliment caught me off guard. Claire knew I had a daughter. It was in my file, part of the background that made me Ethan Brooks, senior analyst, single parent, reliable but never quite available for late-night projects. But she'd never acknowledged her before, not directly. "Thank you. She's everything." The word came out more honest than I'd intended, and I saw something flicker across Claire's face. Recognition, maybe, or understanding. "I can see that." She paused, and in that pause I heard the sounds of the retreat around us. Brad from accounting attempting to organize the volleyball teams, Sarah from HR laughing at something on her phone, the distant crash of waves against the shore. "Mind if I join you? It's gotten a bit much out there." She gestured vaguely toward the main cluster of our coworkers, where someone had just suggested body shots and at least 3 people had enthusiastically agreed. Of course. I shifted the umbrella to extend the shade, suddenly hyper-aware of the fact that my boss was about to sit beside me on a beach towel. Fair warning, though, my daughter's likely to recruit you for castle construction within the next 5 minutes. I'll consider myself warned. Claire settled onto the sand with a grace that seemed at odds with the casual setting, tucking her legs beneath her. This close, I could smell her sunscreen, something expensive probably, that smelled like coconut and something floral I couldn't name. Not the $40 family-size bottle from Costco that currently coated both Lily and me. For a moment, we sat in companionable silence. It should have been awkward, boss and employee, hierarchy and professionalism, all those unspoken rules that governed our Monday through Friday existence. But something about the setting, about the sound of the ocean and the warmth of the sun, seemed to suspend those rules, to create a pocket of space where we were just 2 people sharing shade. "Can I ask you something?" Claire's voice was quiet, almost hesitant, a tone I'd never heard from her before. "Sure. How do you do it? The balance, work and Lily and everything else." I laughed, but it came out bitter. "Do I look balanced to you? I'm at a company beach retreat with a 7-year-old, carrying enough supplies to stock a small pharmacy. I left the office at 3 yesterday to make her dance recital, which meant I was up until midnight finishing the Henderson analysis. Last Tuesday, I had to take a client call from the pediatrician's waiting room because she had an ear infection and the nanny was sick. Balance isn't the word I'd use. What word would you use?" I thought about it, watching Lily pat down a tower with fierce concentration. "Juggling. Constantly juggling, and constantly aware that if I drop one ball, it all comes crashing down." Claire was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was softer. "I think you're doing better than you give yourself credit for." "You say that because you see me at work, where I've got systems and routines and the blessed structure of a 9-to-5 schedule. Well, more like 7 to 6, but still. You don't see the mornings when I've burned breakfast because I was trying to find her homework and answer emails at the same time. You don't see the nights when I'm so tired I can barely read her a bedtime story without my eyes crossing." "No," Claire said. "But I see the man who never misses a deadline, who produces work that's consistently excellent, and who I've watched take calls in his car because he needed to pick up his daughter on time. I see someone who's made it work when most people would have fallen apart." The compliment settled over me like warmth, unexpected and a little uncomfortable. I wasn't used to this version of Claire, the one who offered personal observations, who seemed genuinely interested in my answer rather than just collecting data points for a performance review. "Thank you," I said finally. "That means a lot." "Daddy!" Right on schedule, Lily came bounding over, sand coating her legs up to her knees. "I need help with the moat. Keeps filling in." "That's because you're too close to the water, sweet pea. The sand's too wet there." "But I need water for the moat. How else will I keep out the invaders?" I opened my mouth to explain the engineering challenges of moat construction, but Claire spoke first. "What if we built a bucket brigade?" she suggested, and I heard real enthusiasm in her voice. "We could bring water from the ocean and pour it in. That way the moat stays where you want it, and you can control how much water goes in." Lily's eyes went wide. "Would you help me?" I expected polite decline, some version of maybe later that adults used when they wanted to sound supportive without committing. Instead, Claire smiled, a real smile, not the professional one I was used to seeing in meetings. "I'd be happy to. Lead the way." And just like that, my boss was following my daughter across the sand, both of them discussing moat architecture with the kind of seriousness usually reserved for quarterly earnings reports. I sat there for a moment, processing what I'd just witnessed. Then I grabbed a bucket and followed. The next hour passed in a blur of sand and seawater and engineering challenges. Claire proved to be surprisingly good with kids, patient where I would have been frustrated, creative where I would have been practical. She listened when Lily explained her vision for a castle that could house at least 50 princesses and maybe some dragons if they're friendly, and she offered suggestions that enhanced rather than corrected. "You're good at this," I said at one point, when Lily had run off to find shells for decoration. Claire looked up from the tower she'd been shaping, surprise crossing her face. At sandcastles? At kids? At listening to them like they're people with valid ideas, not just small humans to be managed. Something shuddered in her expression, there and gone so fast I almost missed it. I had practice once, a long time ago. Before I could ask what she meant, Lily returned with a handful of shells, and the conversation shifted. But the moment stayed with me. That glimpse of something deeper, something that suggested Clare Morgan wasn't just the polished professional I saw in the office. By the time we'd completed the castle, a sprawling complex that incorporated elements of Gothic architecture, modern engineering, and pure seven-year-old whimsy, the sun had shifted, lengthening shadows across the beach. Most of our coworkers had migrated toward the resort's patio, where the afternoon activities were shifting from beach games to an early dinner. I should probably get her cleaned up, I said, noting the sand that had somehow infiltrated every possible crevice of my daughter's body. Shower before dinner. Will you sit with us? Lily asked Claire directly, with the kind of forthright invitation that only children could pull off. We could sit together at dinner. I felt my face heat. Lily, Ms. Morgan probably has... I'd like that, Claire said, and the simple directness of it cut through my embarrassment. If it's okay with your dad, of course. What was I supposed to say to that? My boss wanted to have dinner with my daughter and me, at a company function, where lines were already blurry and boundaries already soft. Sure, I heard myself say. That would be nice. Lily beamed, and I tried not to think about how complicated this was becoming. The resort's outdoor shower area was designed with families in mind. Multiple stalls, each with a changing area and hooks for towels. I'd just gotten Lily rinsed off and was in the process of the Herculean task of getting sand out of a 7-year-old's hair when I heard voices from the path. Telling you, something's different about her today. Did you see her actually building sandcastles? Clare Morgan, sandcastles. I've worked here for 6 years and I didn't think she knew how to smile. I recognized Brad's voice, tinged with the kind of alcohol-loosened speculation that came out at company events. Maybe she's finally unwinding, Sarah responded. Lord knows she deserves it. Woman works harder than anyone I've ever met. Or maybe she's finally interested in someone. Brad's tone had shifted to something more knowing, more insinuating. Did you notice who she was spending all afternoon with? My hand stilled in Lily's hair. Ethan? Come on, Brad. She was just being nice to his kid. Right, because Clare Morgan is known for being nice. Face it, there was something there. The way she was looking at him. You're drunk and reading into things. Claire's professional. She'd never... Professional doesn't mean dead, Sarah. And Ethan's not bad looking in that whole responsible single dad kind of way. Some women go for that. Daddy, that hurts, Lily whimpered, and I realized I'd been gripping her hair too tightly. Sorry, sweet pea. I forced my hands to relax, to focus on the task rather than the conversation happening just beyond the shower wall. Almost done. But Brad's words echoed in my head. There was something there. The way she was looking at him was there. I'd been so focused on the strangeness of the situation, on the oddity of seeing Claire outside her usual context, that I hadn't stopped to analyze the interaction itself. The ease of our conversation, the way she'd smiled at Lily. The moment when our hands had brushed reaching for the same bucket, and I'd felt... What? What had I felt? I shut down that line of thinking immediately. Claire was my boss. She was professional and polished and completely out of my league in every conceivable way. Whatever Brad thought he'd seen was alcohol and speculation and the kind of gossip that sprouted at company events like mushrooms after rain. Nothing more. By the time we made it to dinner, the patio was already full. Long tables had been set up overlooking the ocean, strung with lights that would turn magical once the sun set. The mood was festive, loud with conversation and laughter, the kind of forced camaraderie that happened when coworkers tried to pretend they were friends. I spotted Claire immediately. She'd changed into a simple sundress, her hair still loose, and she was standing near one of the tables talking to James Morrison himself. The Morrison of Morrison and Associates, the founder who'd mostly stepped back from daily operations but still showed up for important company events. Seeing them together was a reminder of the gulf between us. Claire belonged in that world, the world of executive decisions and profit margins and strategic planning. I was a senior analyst, good at my job, respected, but ultimately just another employee. The idea that there could be anything between us beyond professional courtesy was absurd. There she is! Lily spotted Claire before I could redirect her, and before I could stop her, she was running across the patio. I followed, trying to look casual rather than mortified, as my daughter inserted herself directly into what was clearly a business conversation. "Miss Morgan, we're here!" Claire's face transformed when she saw Lily, that professional mask slipping into something genuine and warm. "So you are. I was hoping you'd make it." James Morrison looked between Claire, Lily, and me with undisguised curiosity. "And who's this young lady?" "This is Lily Brooks," Claire said, and I noted how naturally she made the introduction, as if children interrupting business conversations was perfectly normal. "Lily, this is Mr. Morrison. He started the company where your dad works." "Are you Claire's boss?" Lily asked with typical 7-year-old directness. James laughed, a deep booming sound that made several people turn. "In theory, yes. In practice, I think Claire runs circles around all of us. Your father, too, from what I hear. Ethan, good to see you. Didn't know you were bringing family." "Last-minute arrangement," I said, trying to strike the right balance between professional and casual. "Childcare fell through. Well, we're glad to have you both. Glad to—" "Claire, I'll let you get to dinner. We'll talk more about the Singapore expansion tomorrow." He moved off, and I was left standing there with Claire, Lily between us, very aware that several people were watching our interaction with interest. "I saved us seats," Claire said, gesturing to a table near the edge of the patio. "Hope that's okay." "More than okay. Thank you." The table she'd chosen was perfect, close enough to the main group to be social, far enough away to have actual conversations without shouting. As we settled in, Lily between us, I felt some of the tension from earlier ease. This was just dinner, just colleagues sharing a meal at a company function. Nothing complicated about it, except it didn't feel simple. It felt like something else entirely. The meal service started, and with it came the kind of easy conversation that surprised me. Claire asked Lily about school, about her favorite subjects and her friends, and she listened to the answers with genuine interest. When Lily launched into an elaborate explanation of the drama in her second-grade class, apparently someone had brought cupcakes for their birthday, and not everyone got the same flavor, which had caused significant social upheaval. Claire nodded along as if this was the most important geopolitical situation she'd encountered. "Sounds complicated," she said seriously. "What did you do?" "I told Emma that chocolate and vanilla taste basically the same if you eat them fast enough," Lily explained. "But she didn't believe me, so now she's not talking to Maya, and Maya's not talking to Sophie, and it's a whole thing." "Ah," Claire said, "the cupcake détente has failed." Lily giggled at the word détente, and I found myself smiling despite my earlier concerns. This was nice. Surprisingly, genuinely nice. "She's handling it better than some board members I've dealt with," Claire said to me quietly, while Lily was distracted by the arrival of her chicken fingers. "At least she tried diplomacy first." 7-year-olds are surprisingly political when you give them the chance. I'm learning that. Our eyes met, and I felt it again. That spark of something I couldn't quite name. Connection, maybe. Understanding. The sense that we were sharing a moment that existed slightly outside the normal flow of the evening. I looked away first, unsettled. The dinner progressed with multiple courses and more wine than was probably wise for a work function. Around us, conversations grew louder, laughter more frequent. Brad had moved on to telling stories about his college days that were definitely not appropriate for children, and Sarah was attempting to organize a bonfire for later. "This is nice," Claire said at one point, so quietly I almost didn't hear her. "Being here, with people who aren't trying to get something from me." I glanced at Lily, who was carefully arranging her French fries in order of size, completely absorbed in her task. She's definitely not after anything except maybe dessert. "I meant both of you." The words hung in the air between us, weighted with something I wasn't sure I wanted to examine. "Claire, I know," she said quickly. "I know what this looks like, what it might seem like. But I just mean, it's refreshing. You're not asking me for a promotion or trying to get insider information about the restructuring. You're just here, being a dad, being yourself." I'm always myself. Are you? She turned to face me fully, and in the soft light from the string lights above us, her eyes were darker, more intense. I see how you are in the office, Ethan. You're good at your job, brilliant even, but you're always holding something back, always careful, like you're afraid one wrong move will topple everything. Her perception unsettled me because it was true. I did hold back. I had to. Being a single parent meant I couldn't afford to take risks, couldn't afford to ruffle feathers or make waves. I needed the stability, the reliable paycheck, the health insurance that covered Lily's regular checkups and occasional ear infections. It's called being responsible, I said, aiming for light but landing somewhere defensive. I know, I respect it, but sometimes responsibility can become a cage, says the CEO who probably works 80 hours a week. Exactly. Her smile was rueful. I'm not criticizing. I'm relating. Before I could respond, dessert arrived, some elaborate chocolate creation that made Lily's eyes go wide. The moment passed, but the words stayed with me. Responsibility can become a cage. Was that what I'd built for myself? A cage of routine and safety and carefully managed risk? After dinner, as the sun finally dipped below the horizon and the bonfire Sarah had promised materialized on the beach, I took Lily back to our room. She was fading fast, the day's excitement catching up with her, and I wanted to get her settled before she hit the overtired stage that could only end in tears. Did you have fun today? I asked, as I tucked her into the resort's surprisingly comfortable bed. So much fun. The castle was the best, and Ms. Morgan is really nice. She's pretty too. She is nice, I agreed carefully. Do you think she's lonely? The question surprised me. What makes you ask that? Lily shrugged, settling deeper into the pillows. I don't know. She has a sad smile sometimes, like Mrs. Patterson at school after her husband died. Happy on the outside, but sad underneath. The observation was far too perceptive for a 7-year-old, and it struck something in my chest. Because Lily wasn't wrong. I'd seen it too, in unguarded moments, that flash of something melancholy beneath Claire's polished exterior. Maybe, I said finally, but that's not for us to worry about, okay? Ms. Morgan is a grown-up who can take care of herself. Can we have breakfast with her tomorrow? We'll see. Now sleep. Big day tomorrow. She was out within minutes, her breathing evening into the soft rhythm of childhood sleep. I stood there for a moment, watching her, feeling the familiar surge of love and terror that came with being solely responsible for another human's well-being. I should have stayed in the room, should have taken advantage of the quiet to catch up on emails or read the report I'd brought with me. Should have been responsible. Instead, I found myself walking back down to the beach. The bonfire was still going, surrounded by a smaller group now, the hardcore partiers who'd either skipped dinner or had finished early. I could hear music playing from someone's phone, see silhouettes moving against the flames. I walked in the other direction, away from the noise, toward the quieter stretch of beach where the resort's lights faded into darkness. The moon was nearly full, casting silver across the water, and the sound of the waves was loud enough to drown out thought. Couldn't sleep either? I turned, and there was Clare, standing a few feet away. She'd wrapped a shawl around her shoulders against the evening breeze, and her feet were bare. Lily's asleep. I just needed some air. Me too. It gets exhausting after a while, doesn't it? All that forced cheerfulness. She walked closer, and I was struck again by how different she seemed here. Softer, more human. Like the beach had stripped away some essential professional armor, leaving just the person underneath. Want to walk? She asked. I knew I should say no, should make some excuse about needing to check on Lily or having work to do, should maintain those boundaries that were already feeling dangerously thin. Sure, I said instead. We walked in silence at first, our footprints appearing dark and temporary in the wet sand near the waterline. The ocean stretched out beside us, vast and dark, and full of depths I couldn't see. Can I tell you something? Claire's voice was quiet, nearly lost in the sound of the waves. Something I don't usually talk about? Of course. She was quiet for so long I thought she'd changed her mind. Then, I had a daughter once, not biologically. I was engaged when I was younger, and he had a daughter from a previous relationship, Emma. She was 5 when I met her, 6 when her father and I got engaged. I loved her immediately, completely. My chest tightened. What happened? Her father cheated. Multiple times, apparently. When I found out, when I left, I lost both of them. He got full custody. She wasn't mine, not legally, and her mother didn't want me around. I went from being almost mom to nothing overnight. Claire, I'm so sorry. It was 10 years ago. I should be over it by now. But watching you with Lily today, it brought it all back. The way she looks at you, the way you anticipate her needs before she even expresses them. That bond. I had that once, briefly, and then it was gone. I understood then, with sudden clarity, the loneliness my daughter had sensed, the sad smile beneath the happy exterior. That's why you never talk about your personal life at work, I said. Why you're all business, all the time. It's easier, safer. If I don't let people in, they can't leave and take pieces of me with them. We'd stopped walking. The ocean crashed beside us, each wave reaching toward our feet before retreating. That sounds lonely, I said quietly. It is. She looked at me, and in the moonlight her eyes were bright with unshed tears. But you understand that, don't you? The loneliness of responsibility. The way it's easier to just focus on the job, the child, the things you can control, rather than risk the complications of letting someone in. She was right, and the truth of it hit me like a physical thing. Since Lily's mother had left, had decided that motherhood wasn't for her, and walked away when Lily was 6 months old, I'd built my entire life around avoiding exactly the kind of vulnerability Claire was describing. It was safer to be alone, simpler to focus on work and Lily and nothing else. But standing here, on this beach, with this woman who was somehow both my boss and a stranger, and something that felt almost like a friend, I felt the walls I'd built start to crack. It's not working as well as I'd like, I admitted. The isolation. Some days it feels like I'm watching my life happen rather than living it. I know exactly what you mean. The moment stretched between us, heavy with shared understanding and something else, something neither of us was quite willing to name yet. Then Claire stepped closer, close enough that I could feel the warmth of her despite the cool breeze, and said, "Thank you for today, for sharing your daughter with me, for reminding me what I've been missing. Thank you for being kind to her. She doesn't have a lot of women in her life. My sister when she can visit, her teacher, but no one who—" I trailed off, not sure how to finish the thought without making it strange. "No one who could be more?" Claire finished softly. The question hung in the air between us, impossible to answer honestly without changing everything. Before I could try, she turned back toward the resort. "We should get back. Tomorrow's going to be another long day." But neither of us moved, not yet. "Claire," I said, her name feeling oddly intimate on my tongue. "This probably isn't appropriate, but I'm glad you joined us today. Glad you're here." She smiled, and it wasn't her professional smile or even the genuine but careful one from earlier. It was something more vulnerable, more real. "So am I." Then she did turn, and I let her go, watching her silhouette fade into the darkness until she disappeared entirely. I stood there for a long time after, listening to the ocean and trying to figure out what had just happened, what was happening, what it meant that my boss had shared something deeply personal with me, that we'd stood too close on a beach and both felt the pull of something that probably shouldn't exist. Tomorrow we'd be back in the world of team-building exercises and company hierarchies and all the reasons why this, whatever this was, couldn't happen. But tonight, just for tonight, standing on the beach with the taste of possibility in the air, I let myself wonder what if. What if I was brave enough to want something just for myself? What if Claire was too? What if the walls we'd both built could be bridges instead? The ocean had no answers, just wave after wave reaching for the shore and falling back, eternal and patient and unresolved. I walked back to the room slowly, testing the weight of these new feelings, these new possibilities. Lily was still sleeping soundly, one arm thrown over her head in complete abandon. I stood in the doorway watching her, this small person who was my entire world, and felt the familiar grip of terror and love. Whatever happened next, she came first, always. But as I lay in bed that night, listening to my daughter's soft breathing and the distant sound of the ocean, I couldn't stop thinking about Claire's words. Responsibility can become a cage, and I couldn't stop wondering if maybe, just maybe, I was ready to find the key. Morning arrived with the kind of aggressive cheerfulness that only resort staff could muster. Ethan woke to find Lily already awake, sitting cross-legged on her bed and staring out the window at the ocean with the intense focus of a philosopher contemplating existence. "Daddy, do fish ever get tired of swimming?" He checked his phone. 6:45. Of course she was awake early on the one day he could have slept in. "I don't think so, Sweet Pea. It's just what they do." "But don't their fins get sore? When I swim for a long time, my arms get tired." Fish are built differently than people. Their whole bodies are designed for swimming. She considered this, then nodded as if he'd answered some profound question. "Can we have breakfast with Ms. Morgan again?" There it was. The question he'd been expecting since last night, lying in bed unable to sleep, replaying every moment on the beach with Clare. The way she'd stood close enough for him to count the freckles on her shoulders. The way her voice had cracked when she talked about Emma. The way the space between them had felt charged with possibility. "We'll see if she's available," he said carefully. "Ms. Morgan might have other plans. But she said she wanted to see us again. She told me when you were getting napkins at dinner. She said I could show her my shell collection." Ethan hadn't known about that promise, and something warm unfurled in his chest at the image of Clare making plans with his daughter. Plans that assumed a continuation, a future beyond yesterday's sandcastle building. They made their way down to the resort's breakfast buffet, Lily clutching the small bag of shells she'd collected the previous day. The dining area was less crowded than Ethan had expected. Apparently most of his co-workers were sleeping off the previous night's bonfire and drinking. He recognized a few early risers scattered among the tables, nursing coffee and staring at their phones with the glazed expression of people checking work emails on vacation. Clare wasn't there. Ethan felt the disappointment like a physical thing, which was ridiculous. She was his boss. She had no obligation to have breakfast with him, no reason to continue the unexpected intimacy of yesterday. Whatever had happened on the beach last night was probably just a moment, a brief crack in the professional facade that would seal itself back up in the daylight. He was loading Lily's plate with fruit and yogurt when he heard her voice behind him. "I was hoping I'd find you here." He turned too quickly, nearly dropping the serving spoon. Clare stood there in jeans and a soft blue sweater, her hair pulled back in a ponytail that made her look younger, more approachable. She carried 2 cups of coffee, and she held one out to him with a small smile. "Black, right? I've seen you in enough morning meetings to know your order." The gesture was simple, but it felt significant. She'd noticed. She'd remembered. She'd thought about him enough to bring him coffee without being asked. "Thank you," he managed, taking the cup. Their fingers brushed, and he felt that spark again, undeniable now in the bright morning light. "Ms. Morgan, you came!" Lily had spotted them and was racing over with the enthusiasm that characterized all her movements. "I brought my shells to show you." "I'm so glad. Should we find a table?" They settled by the windows overlooking the beach, and Lily immediately launched into detailed descriptions of each shell in her collection. Clare listened with the same attention she gave to board presentations, asking questions about where each one was found and what made it special. Ethan watched them, his daughter's animated face and Clare's genuine interest, and felt something shift inside him. This wasn't just his boss being polite. This was Clare choosing to spend her morning with them when she could have been anywhere else, doing anything else. "This one's my favorite," Lily said, holding up a small spiral shell that had a pink interior. "It's like it's hiding a secret inside." "It is beautiful," Clare agreed. "Sometimes the best things are the ones you have to look closely to see." Her eyes flicked to Ethan as she said it, and he felt heat rise in his face. "Lily, why don't you go get some more orange juice?" he suggested, needing a moment to collect himself. Once his daughter was out of earshot, Clare leaned forward slightly. "I'm sorry if this is too much. If I'm overstepping, I woke up thinking about yesterday, and I wanted to see you both again." "You're not overstepping," Ethan said, and meant it. "But I have to ask, what are we doing here, Clare? Because from the outside, this probably looks like I'm showing favoritism to one of my employees. Like there's something inappropriate happening." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I know how it looks. I've been thinking about that too. And I don't have a good answer. I just know that yesterday was the first time in years I felt like a person instead of a position. The first time I've laughed without calculating how it would be perceived. The first time I've wanted to spend time with someone just because I enjoyed their company, not because it served some professional purpose. The honesty in her voice made Ethan's chest tight. He understood exactly what she meant because he felt it too, this sense of stepping outside the carefully constructed roles they'd both built for themselves. My sister asked me once why I don't date, he said quietly. Why I don't even try. I told her I didn't have time, that Lily was my priority, that it was too complicated. But the truth is, I was scared. Scared of letting someone in and having them leave. Scared of Lily getting attached to someone who might disappear. Scared of wanting something just for myself and having it fall apart. And now? Lily was making her way back, carefully carrying a cup of orange juice that threatened to slosh over the sides with each step. Now I'm still scared, Ethan admitted, but maybe that's not a good enough reason anymore. Claire's expression softened, and she reached across the table to briefly touch his hand. The contact lasted only a second, but it felt like a promise. The rest of breakfast passed in easy conversation, the three of them falling into a rhythm that felt natural despite its impossibility. When they finished, Claire suggested a walk on the beach before the day's scheduled activities began. There's supposed to be some kind of team scavenger hunt thing this afternoon, she said with a grimace. Mandatory fun according to the itinerary, but we have a few hours before that starts. The beach was quieter in the morning, populated mostly by joggers and early rising families. They walked along the waterline, Lily running ahead to investigate tide pools while Claire and Ethan followed at a slower pace. Tell me about her mother, Claire said suddenly. If that's not too personal. Ethan had learned to expect this question, though it never got easier to answer. We weren't together long, a few months. When she got pregnant, we tried to make it work. Moved in together, made plans. But after Lily was born, she couldn't handle it. Said she felt trapped, that motherhood wasn't what she expected. One day I came home from work and she was just gone. Left a note saying she couldn't do it anymore. How old was Lily? 6 months. Claire stopped walking. She left a 6-month-old baby? I was angry for a long time, furious actually, but eventually I realized that she did the right thing. If she couldn't be present, couldn't commit, it was better for Lily that she left rather than staying and resenting her. Doesn't mean it doesn't hurt Lily sometimes, wondering why her mother didn't want her, but at least she has one parent who's all in. You're a good father, Ethan, the best kind. I'm just doing what needs to be done. No, Claire said firmly. You're doing more than that. You're showing up every day with your whole heart. That's not obligation. That's love. They watched Lily crouch beside a tide pool, her finger carefully touching the water's surface. What about you? Ethan asked. After Emma. After everything. Did you ever want to try again? Find someone? Maybe have kids of your own? Claire was quiet for a long moment. I threw myself into work instead. Built my career into something I could control, something that couldn't leave me. I told myself it was enough, that professional success could fill all the spaces that personal connection used to occupy. Did it? What do you think? Her voice was light, but Ethan heard the loneliness underneath. He understood it because he'd been living it too, this half-life of responsibility and routine, of being needed but not necessarily wanted, of competence masking emptiness. Daddy, look! A crab! Lily's voice carried across the sand, excited and urgent. They spent the next hour exploring tide pools, Claire crouching beside Lily to examine hermit crabs and anemones with the same careful attention she probably gave to financial reports. She knew surprising amounts about marine biology, explaining the ecosystem dynamics with enough detail that Ethan suspected this wasn't casual knowledge. I grew up near the ocean, she explained when he asked. Spent every summer on the beach. It was the one place I felt free. Is that why you came to this retreat? For the ocean? Partially. Mostly I came because James insisted. Said I needed to be more visible, more approachable. That the staff sees me as intimidating. You are intimidating, Ethan said honestly. In the office, you're formidable. And here? He looked at her, really looked at her. Hair coming loose from its ponytail, sand on her jeans, laughing at something Lily had just said. Here, you're just Claire. Something passed between them, an understanding that felt both thrilling and terrifying. They were crossing lines, blurring boundaries that existed for good reasons, but neither of them seemed able to stop. By the time they made their way back to the resort, the place had come alive with activity. The scavenger hunt Claire had mentioned was being organized on the main lawn, with Brad, looking worse for wear but determinedly cheerful, dividing people into teams. "Pairs," he announced as they approached. "We're doing pairs for this one. I've got a random number generator to make it fair." Ethan caught Claire's eye, and they both knew what was coming before Brad's phone even loaded. The universe had a sense of humor, it seemed. "Brooks and Morgan," Brad called out, and Ethan could have sworn he saw speculation flash across his coworker's face. "Team 7, here's your list." The list was extensive. Photos to take, items to find, challenges to complete. Standard corporate team-building fare, designed to force interaction and cooperation. "Looks like we're stuck together," Claire said, but she was smiling. "Tragic," Ethan replied, and felt his own smile grow when she laughed. Lily, it turned out, was being looked after by the resort's kids club, something Ethan hadn't known existed but was grateful for now. After making sure his daughter was settled with a group of other children and approximately 17 craft supplies, he rejoined Claire at the starting line. "Ready to see my competitive side?" she asked as Brad counted down to the start. "I've seen you negotiate contracts. I'm terrified." The scavenger hunt was ridiculous in the way these things always were, requiring them to perform embarrassing tasks, take silly photos, and work together in ways that would have been painful with someone he didn't know. But with Claire, it was different, fun even. They raced from location to location, laughing at the absurdity of it all. At one checkpoint, they had to build a sandcastle together in under 5 minutes. At another, they had to recreate a famous painting using only items found on the beach. Each task required them to communicate, to coordinate, to touch hands and shoulders, and exist in each other's space in ways that felt both innocent and charged. "We need something blue for the sky," Claire said during the painting challenge, surveying the beach around them. "And we're supposed to be doing Starry Night, so we need a lot of blue." "There's some blue sea glass over there," Ethan pointed. "And maybe we could use water mixed with sand to create different shades." They worked seamlessly, falling into a rhythm that suggested they'd been partners for years rather than boss and employee, attempting their first collaboration outside the office. When they finished, a surprisingly accurate rendition of Van Gogh's masterpiece, made entirely of shells, driftwood, and carefully arranged sand, they stepped back to admire it. "We're actually pretty good at this," Claire said. "We make a good team." The words hung between them, meaning more than just the scavenger hunt. The final challenge was on a secluded part of the beach, away from the main resort. They had to find 3 specific types of shells, take a photo with a landmark formation, and then answer a trivia question about company history. They were searching for the 3rd shell when Claire suddenly grabbed his arm. "Ethan, stop." He froze. "What?" "Look." She pointed ahead, where a sea turtle had emerged from the water and was slowly making its way up the beach. "She's coming to nest." They watched in silence as the turtle dug her nest, the ancient ritual playing out before them. Other teams were probably finishing by now, probably winning the scavenger hunt, but neither Ethan nor Claire moved. This felt more important than any corporate competition. "I haven't seen this in years," Claire whispered. "Not since I was a kid." "It's incredible." When the turtle finally finished and made her way back to the ocean, they were alone on that stretch of beach. The resort was distant enough that they couldn't hear the other teams, couldn't see anyone else. It was just them and the sound of waves and the marks in the sand where the turtle had been. "Thank you for stopping," Ethan said, "for not rushing past that. Some things are worth slowing down for." She was looking at him when she said it, and Ethan felt his heart hammer against his ribs. They were standing close, closer than necessary, and he could see the exact moment when Claire made a decision. "I need to tell you something," she said, "and I need you to let me finish before you respond, okay?" "Okay." "Yesterday, last night on the beach, you asked what we're doing here. I didn't have an answer then, but I do now." She took a breath, steadying herself. "I like you, Ethan. Not as an employee, not as a colleague, as a person, as a man. I like the way you are with your daughter, the way you take responsibility seriously without letting it consume you completely." I like that you noticed when I was uncomfortable at the bonfire. I like that you understand loneliness because you've lived it too. Ethan's breath caught. I know this is complicated, Claire continued. I know I'm your boss, that there are power dynamics and professional ethics and 100 reasons why we shouldn't even be having this conversation. But I also know that I'm tired of living half a life. Tired of pretending that success is enough when I go home to an empty apartment every night. Tired of convincing myself that I don't want connection just because wanting it feels dangerous. She paused, her eyes searching his face. So I'm telling you how I feel, consequences be damned. And if you don't feel the same way, we can forget this conversation ever happened. We can go back to being professional. I'll never mention it again. But if you do feel something, even if it's just curiosity or possibility, then I think we owe it to ourselves to explore it. Carefully, responsibly, but honestly. The ocean crashed behind them, patient and eternal. Ethan thought about all the reasons he should say no, all the complications this would create, the risk to his job, his stability, the carefully controlled world he'd built for Lily's sake. And then he thought about last night on the beach, about this morning over coffee, about the way his daughter's face lit up when Claire paid attention to her. He thought about the cage of responsibility he'd built and whether maybe it was time to find the door. I feel it too, he said, and watched relief flood Claire's expression. I've been feeling it since yesterday, maybe even before that. All those meetings where I caught myself watching you, wondering what you were like outside the office. All those times I wanted to ask you personal questions but didn't because it wasn't appropriate. I convinced myself it was just admiration, professional respect. But it's more than that. Ethan, let me finish, he said gently, echoing her earlier request. I'm terrified of this, of what it could mean, what it could become. I have to think about Lily first, always. If we do this, whatever this is, and it goes wrong, it's not just my heart that could break. It's hers too. She already likes you. A lot. And if you became part of our lives and then left, I wouldn't do that to her, Claire said fiercely. Or to you. I've been on the other side of that, remember? I know what it costs when adults don't think about how their choices affect kids. I know you know, but I need you to understand that this isn't just casual for me. Can't be. I don't have the luxury of casual. So if we're going to explore this, I need to know you're serious, that you've thought about what it means. Claire reached out and took his hand, her fingers threading through his with the kind of intentionality that suggested she'd been thinking about this exact gesture. I'm serious. I've thought about little else since last night. I know it's fast, maybe too fast. I know we should probably take months to figure this out, date properly, establish boundaries. But I also know that I'm 42 years old, that I've spent the last decade building walls, and that you're the first person who's made me want to tear them down. We'll have to be careful, Ethan said, even as he squeezed her hand, for Lily's sake. She can't know until we're sure. And at work nothing changes, Claire said firmly. Completely professional. No favoritism, no special treatment. In fact, I'll probably be harder on you than before just to prove there's no bias. That seems excessive. Maybe. But it's necessary. This only works if we're both absolutely committed to keeping the personal and professional separate. Ethan thought about all the rom-coms he'd never watched, all the dating advice he'd never needed. This wasn't how these things usually went, he suspected. Most people didn't start relationships with negotiations about boundaries and professional ethics. But most people weren't a single father and a CEO trying to navigate an impossible situation. Okay, he said finally. We try this. Carefully, honestly, with Lily's well-being as the absolute priority. With Lily's well-being as the priority, Claire agreed. They stood there for another moment, hands linked, both of them seeming to realize the significance of what they'd just agreed to. Then Claire smiled, and it transformed her face into something radiant. We should probably finish the scavenger hunt, she said, or people will wonder what we've been doing. Watching a sea turtle nest, completely innocent. Completely. But when they turned to go, neither of them let go of the other's hand. Not yet. Not until they could see the resort in the distance and the possibility of witnesses. They didn't win the scavenger hunt. Came in fourth, actually, which Brad announced with excessive enthusiasm. But Ethan found he didn't care about the results. He'd won something more important, the possibility of something real with someone who understood him. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur of company activities. Claire was pulled into conversations with James Morrison about the Singapore expansion, fielding questions with her usual competence while Ethan watched from a careful distance. To anyone observing, they were exactly what they'd always been: boss and employee, professional and appropriate. But Ethan caught the small glances she sent his way, the brief smile when their eyes met across the patio. They were sharing a secret now, and it felt both exhilarating and terrifying. He picked up Lily from the kids' club to find her covered in paint and buzzing with excitement about the friendship bracelets she'd made. "Can I give one to Miss Morgan?" she asked, holding up a bracelet woven in blue and white. "I made it special for her." "I think she'd love that," Ethan said, his heart swelling at his daughter's thoughtfulness. They found Claire near the pool, and Lily raced over with the kind of confidence only 7-year-olds possessed. "I made this for you. It's a friendship bracelet. See, the blue matches your eyes." Claire crouched down to Lily's level, accepting the bracelet with a solemnity that suggested she understood exactly how significant this gift was. "It's beautiful, Lily. Thank you. Would you help me put it on?" Ethan watched his daughter carefully tie the bracelet around Claire's wrist, her small fingers working the knot with fierce concentration. When she finished, Claire held up her wrist to admire it. "Perfect," she declared. "I'll wear it every day." "Even to work?" "Especially to work. That way when I'm in boring meetings, I can look at it and remember today." The casualness of the promise that there would be future days, that this wasn't just a weekend anomaly, made Ethan's chest tight with hope. Dinner that night was a formal affair, the resort's final event before everyone returned to reality tomorrow. Long tables were set up in the main dining room, and Ethan found himself seated between a marketing analyst he barely knew and Sarah from HR, who kept giving him knowing looks that suggested the gossip mill had been active. Claire was at the head table with James Morrison and the other executives, far enough away that conversation was impossible. But several times during the meal, Ethan looked up to find her watching him, and each time their eyes met, he felt that spark of connection that was becoming familiar. After dinner, there was dancing. Ethan normally avoided these situations. Single dad at a work function wasn't exactly prime dancing material, but Lily had different ideas. "Dance with me, Daddy." So he found himself on the makeshift dance floor, swaying awkwardly to music that was too loud while his daughter spun in circles. Other people joined in, couples, coworkers who'd had enough wine to forget their self-consciousness, even James Morrison attempting what might have been the cha-cha with his wife. Then Claire was there, smiling down at Lily. "Mind if I cut in? You want to dance with Daddy?" Lily's eyes went wide. "Actually, I was hoping to dance with you first, if that's okay with your dad." Ethan nodded, unable to speak past the lump in his throat, and watched as Claire swept his daughter into a proper waltz position. She led Lily around the floor with the grace of someone who'd had lessons, making his daughter feel like a princess, and Ethan fell a little bit more. When the song ended and a faster one began, Claire finally turned to him. "Now you? I should warn you, I'm not very good at this." "Neither am I. We'll be terrible together." They danced, and she was right. They were objectively bad at it, stepping on each other's feet and losing the rhythm. But it didn't matter because Claire was laughing, really laughing, and Ethan felt lighter than he had in years. "Thank you," she said when the song ended. "For today, for being brave enough to say yes. Thank you for asking." They stood there in the middle of the dance floor, people moving around them, existing in a bubble that felt separate from everything else. Tomorrow they'd go back to being boss and employee, back to professional distance and appropriate boundaries. But tonight, just for tonight, they could be something else, something that felt a lot like the beginning of everything. The final morning of the retreat arrived with a different quality of light, as if the sun itself understood that this was an ending. Ethan woke early, lying in the dim room and listening to Lily's soft breathing, thinking about everything that had shifted in the past 48 hours. In 2 days, he'd gone from dutiful employee maintaining careful distance to a man who'd held his boss's hand on a beach and promised to try something that defied every logical boundary he'd established for himself. The responsible part of him, the part that had kept him and Lily safe and stable for 7 years, was screaming warnings. This was reckless, dangerous, a potential disaster that could cost him his job, his reputation. the security his daughter needed. But another part, one he'd buried so deep he'd almost forgotten it existed, was whispering something different. What if this is worth the risk? What if playing it safe has cost you more than you've gained? He was still wrestling with these thoughts when his phone buzzed with a text message. Morning activity is a team scavenger hunt on kayaks. Want a partner? Or is that too obvious? The message was from a number he didn't have saved, but he knew immediately it was Claire. She must have gotten his contact information from HR, which should have felt like an overstep, but instead made him smile. He typed back quickly before he could overthink it. Lily can't kayak yet. I'll have to sit this one out. The response came almost immediately. What if she came with us? 3-person kayak. Resort has them. Ethan stared at the message, his heart doing something complicated in his chest. Claire was suggesting including his daughter in their partnership, making space for Lily rather than treating her as an obstacle. The thoughtfulness of it, the deliberate inclusion, made him ache with something he didn't want to name yet. She'd love that, he typed. Then after a pause added, thank you for thinking of her. Always. One word, but it carried the weight of a promise. An hour later, they were standing at the resort's dock, Lily bouncing with excitement as a staff member helped them into a wide, stable kayak designed for families. Claire took the front position, Ethan the back, and Lily was settled in the middle with her own smaller paddle and a life jacket that was almost comically oversized. The goal is to paddle to 3 different checkpoints around the bay, Brad explained to the assembled teams, most of whom looked significantly less enthusiastic than Lily. At each checkpoint, you'll find a challenge. Complete all 3 and paddle back. First team to finish wins. What do we win? Someone called out. The satisfaction of victory and a gift card to the resort restaurant. Several people groaned, but Lily was already gripping her paddle with fierce determination. We're going to win, she announced. Right, Ms. Morgan? Absolutely, Claire said, matching Lily's seriousness. Between the 3 of us, we're unstoppable. They pushed off from the dock, the kayak wobbling slightly before finding its rhythm. Ethan had kayaked before, years ago in college, but Claire moved with the easy confidence of someone who'd done this recently. She set a steady pace that Lily tried valiantly to match, her small paddle dipping into the water with more enthusiasm than technique. You're doing great, sweet pea, Ethan encouraged. Nice, smooth strokes. Like this? Lily adjusted her form and he felt a surge of pride at how quickly she adapted. They glided across the bay's calm water, passing other teams who were either struggling with coordination or stopping to take selfies. The first checkpoint was a small inlet marked with a bright orange buoy, and as they approached, Ethan could see a waterproof container attached to it. Claire reached out and grabbed it, pulling out a laminated card. Challenge 1. As a team, list 10 things you have in common. Write them on the provided paper and return it to the container. That's easy, Lily said. We all like the beach. Good start, Claire said, accepting the pencil and paper from the container. What else? We all like sandcastles, Lily continued, and we all think orange juice is better than apple juice. Do we all think that? Ethan asked, amused. Well, we should. It's a fact. Claire was writing down Lily's suggestions, a smile playing at her lips. What about we all value honesty? That's a good one, Ethan said, catching her eye. There were layers to that statement, acknowledgments of the conversations they'd had about being truthful with each other, about not hiding behind professional facades. We all like learning new things, Claire added. We all think families are important. We all appreciate kindness. They filled out the list quickly, a mix of silly observations from Lily and more thoughtful ones from the adults. When they returned the paper to the container and pushed off toward the second checkpoint, Ethan noticed how naturally they'd worked together, finishing each other's thoughts and building on each other's ideas. You know what else we have in common? Claire said, her voice carrying back over her shoulder. We're all terrible at kayaking in a straight line. It was true. They'd been zigzagging across the water, Lily's enthusiastic but uncoordinated paddling throwing off their trajectory. But somehow that made it better, more fun. This wasn't about winning, Ethan realized. It was about the 3 of them learning to move together, to adjust and accommodate and find their rhythm. The second checkpoint was farther out, near a cluster of rocks where seals sometimes sunbathed. As they approached, Lily squealed with delight. Look, baby seals! Sure enough, 3 young seals were lounging on the rocks, watching the kayaks with mild interest. Clare stopped paddling to let them drift closer, and for a few minutes they just floated there, observing the animals. "They're so peaceful," Clare said softly, "like they don't have a care in the world." "Must be nice," Ethan said. "No deadlines, no responsibilities, just sun and fish." "Don't forget the predators and harsh weather and competition for food," Clare pointed out, but she was smiling. "Nothing's as simple as it looks." The observation felt pointed, a reminder that what they were attempting, this tentative relationship, would have its own predators and harsh weather. Office politics, professional ethics, the potential for heartbreak. But like the seals, maybe they could find moments of peace in between the challenges. The challenge at the second checkpoint was more physical. They had to work together to tie a series of nautical knots, following diagrams on another laminated card. It required Clare to turn around in the kayak, creating an awkward but intimate closeness as they worked with the rope together. Their hands kept brushing, and each contact sent electricity up Ethan's arm. "You're good at this," he said, as she completed a bowline knot with practiced efficiency. "Summer camp, years ago. I was obsessed with sailing." "What happened to that?" "College happened. Then law school, then work. Life gets in the way of the things we love sometimes." Lily was struggling with a square knot, her small fingers fumbling with the rope. Clare noticed and gently guided her hands without taking over, showing her the motion until Lily got it right. "I did it!" Lily's face glowed with accomplishment. "You absolutely did. You're a natural sailor." The praise made Lily beam, and Ethan felt his throat tighten. This was what he'd been protecting his daughter from by avoiding relationships, the risk of attachment to someone who might leave. But watching Clare's genuine pride in Lily's small victory, he wondered if he'd been protecting her from the wrong thing. Maybe the real danger wasn't letting people in. Maybe it was teaching his daughter that walls were safer than bridges. They completed the knots and headed toward the third checkpoint, which was marked on the map as being near a small island at the far end of the bay. The paddle was longer, and Lily started to tire, her strokes becoming less frequent. "Want to take a break, Sweet Pea?" Ethan asked. "No, I can do it. We have to win, remember?" "We don't have to win," Clare said gently. "We're just here to have fun together." "But you said we were unstoppable." "We are, which means we're unstoppable, whether we come in first or last. Being unstoppable isn't about beating other people. It's about not giving up on each other." The wisdom in that statement wasn't lost on Ethan. Clare wasn't just talking to Lily, she was talking to both of them, about what they were building, about commitment that went beyond competition or achievement. The third checkpoint was in a quiet cove, sheltered from the main bay by the small island. As they paddled into the protected water, Ethan noticed they were alone. The other teams had either taken different routes or were still working on earlier challenges. Clare retrieved the final challenge card and read it aloud. "Share something you've learned this weekend. It can be about yourself, about your teammates, or about life in general. Discuss as a team." For a moment, nobody spoke. The kayak drifted gently, waves lapping against its sides, and Ethan felt the weight of the question settle over them. "I learned that I'm good at making friends," Lily said finally. "Even with grown-ups. Miss Morgan is my friend now, right?" "Absolutely," Clare said, her voice thick with emotion. "You're one of my favorite people, Lily." "What did you learn, Ms. Morgan?" Clare was quiet for a long moment, her paddle resting across the kayak. When she spoke, her voice was soft but steady. "I learned that I've been afraid of the wrong things. I thought letting people in would make me vulnerable, would give them power to hurt me. But being alone, that's its own kind of hurt. And maybe being vulnerable with the right people isn't weakness. Maybe it's the bravest thing you can do." Lily nodded sagely, as if Clare had just explained the meaning of life. "What about you, Daddy?" Ethan looked at the back of Clare's head, at the way sunlight caught in her dark hair, at his daughter sitting between them, connecting them physically, the way she was starting to connect them emotionally. "I learned that being responsible doesn't have to mean being alone," he said carefully. "That maybe I've been so focused on keeping you safe that I forgot we both deserve to be happy too. That sometimes the scary choice is also the right one." Clare turned to look at him, and the expression on her face was so raw, so grateful, that Ethan felt his heart stutter. "Those are good things to learn," Lily pronounced. "Can we finish now? I'm getting hungry." The spell broke, and they laughed, the tension easing into something warmer. They marked their challenge as complete and began the paddle back to the resort. They didn't win, came in third actually, but Ethan found he genuinely didn't care. After the kayaking, there was a final group lunch, a last chance for the company to pretend they were all friends rather than colleagues forced together by organizational charts. Ethan sat with Lily, watching Claire navigate conversations with various executives and department heads. She was different now, he noticed. Still professional, still commanding respect, but there was a softness to her that hadn't been there before. She smiled more easily, laughed at jokes that probably weren't that funny, and several times he caught her touching the friendship bracelet on her wrist, as if reminding herself it was real. "Mr. Brooks, got a minute?" Ethan looked up to find James Morrison standing beside his table, a pleasant smile on his weathered face. His stomach dropped. Had someone said something? Had their careful discretion not been careful enough? "Of course, Mr. Morrison." "Walk with me?" It wasn't really a question. Ethan told Lily to stay at the table and followed the company founder toward the beach, his mind racing through worst-case scenarios. Getting fired, being transferred, having to explain to Lily why they had to move, why Daddy had made a mistake that cost them their stability. But James didn't look angry. He looked thoughtful. "I've been watching you this weekend," James said as they walked along the sand. "You and Claire. Don't worry, I'm not about to lecture you about fraternization policies or professional boundaries. Sir, Let me finish." James held up a hand. "I started this company 40 years ago with nothing but an idea and a lot of stubborn determination, built it into what it is today. And you know what I've learned in all that time? The most successful people aren't the ones who follow every rule perfectly. They're the ones who know which rules matter and which ones are just institutional momentum." Ethan didn't know what to say to that. "Claire is the best CEO this company has ever had," James continued. "Brilliant, dedicated, ethical to a fault. But she's also been alone for as long as I've known her. Married to the job in a way that isn't healthy. I've worried about what happens when she finally burns out, when the work isn't enough anymore." "She seems happy," Ethan said carefully. "She does. Happier than I've seen her in years, and I have a pretty good idea why." James stopped walking and turned to face him directly. "I'm not blind, son. I see the way you look at each other, the way she looks at your daughter. And I'm telling you this not as your CEO, but as someone who's lived long enough to know that connection matters more than profit margins." "We haven't. It's not." Ethan struggled to find words that were honest without being too revealing. "You don't have to explain anything to me, but I do want to give you some advice, if you'll take it." "Of course." "Whatever is happening between you two, be smart about it. Claire knows the ethics policies better than anyone. She helped write them. If this becomes a relationship, there will need to be official disclosures, potential restructuring to avoid conflicts of interest. It's doable, but it requires transparency and planning." "We've talked about that," Ethan said. "About keeping things professional at work. About making sure there's no favoritism or appearance of impropriety." "Good, because I'd hate to lose either of you over something that could be handled properly." James clapped him on the shoulder. "You're a good man, Ethan. Good father, good analyst, good person. Claire could do a lot worse. Hell, she has done worse. Just promise me you'll be careful with her. She pretends to be tough, but underneath all that executive armor, she's more fragile than people realize." The words settled over Ethan like a benediction and a warning. "I promise." "Good. Now get back to your daughter before she eats all the desserts. I saw her eyeing the chocolate fountain." Ethan returned to the table to find Lily exactly where James had predicted, standing at the dessert buffet with a plate piled dangerously high with chocolate-covered strawberries. He was helping her navigate back to their seats when Claire appeared at his elbow. "Everything okay? I saw you with James." "Everything's fine. He just wanted to give some advice." "About us? About being smart. About doing things the right way." Claire's expression flickered with something that might have been relief or concern. "What did you tell him?" "That we're trying to be responsible. That we know the complications." "And he was okay with that?" "More than okay. I think he's rooting for us, actually." Claire's smile was small but genuine. "That's good. I was worried he might see it as a problem. Apparently the only problem would be if we're not careful about how we handle it." They stood there in the middle of the lunch crowd, Not touching, but connected by invisible threads of understanding. Around them, their colleagues were finishing meals, planning departures, already mentally shifting back to work mode. Tomorrow, they'd all be back in the office, back to hierarchies and professional distance and the carefully maintained boundaries of corporate life. But something fundamental had shifted. They'd made a choice, and there was no taking it back now. The afternoon wound down with people slowly trickling out, packing cars and saying goodbyes. Ethan had loaded most of their belongings into his car when Claire found him in the parking lot. "So this is it," she said. "Back to reality." "Back to reality," he echoed. "We should talk about how we want to handle this. At work, I mean." Ethan glanced around, making sure they were alone. "Complete professionalism. No personal conversations during work hours. No special treatment. We keep our personal lives completely separate from the office." "Agreed. Which means I probably can't have lunch with you, even casually. Can't be seen showing favoritism. I'll make sure my work speaks for itself. No relying on our relationship for advancement or special consideration." And outside of work? That was the question, wasn't it? How did they navigate this new territory when their entire connection had started in a work context? "Can I take you to dinner?" Ethan asked. "A real date, just the two of us. Friday night, if you're free." "I'm free." "Should we meet somewhere? Keep it discreet?" "Unless you want to deal with office gossip on Monday, probably a good idea." Claire smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "I hate this part, the sneaking around, the hiding. It feels dishonest." "It's temporary," Ethan said. "Just until we figure out what this is, whether it's something that can work long term. Once we know it's serious, we can be transparent about it, file the proper disclosures, deal with any necessary restructuring." "You've really thought this through." "I have to. I can't afford to be impulsive, not with Lily depending on me." "I know. It's one of the things Claire trailed off, seeming to catch herself. "It's one of the things I respect about you." But Ethan heard what she'd almost said, and his heart kicked against his ribs. Lily appeared then, running across the parking lot with her backpack bouncing. "Daddy, I can't find Mr. Snuggles." "Did you check under your bed?" "I checked everywhere." Ethan sighed, knowing they'd have to go back to the room for one more search. Mr. Snuggles was a stuffed elephant that Lily had owned since she was 2, and bedtime without him was a battle not worth fighting. "I'll help look," Claire offered. "You don't have to." "I want to." So the three of them trooped back to the room, searching under beds and in corners until Claire triumphantly produced Mr. Snuggles from behind the bathroom door, where he'd apparently fallen during the morning rush. "You found him!" Lily threw her arms around Claire's waist in a spontaneous hug that made Claire's eyes go wide with surprise and then soft with affection. "Of course I did. Mr. Snuggles and I have an understanding." "What kind of understanding?" "That he needs to stay where you can find him, and I need to be observant enough to spot hiding elephants." Lily giggled, and Ethan felt something crack open in his chest. This was what he'd been afraid of, his daughter getting attached, loving someone who might not stay. But watching them together, seeing the genuine care in Claire's expression, he wondered if maybe the risk was worth it. They said their goodbyes in the parking lot, keeping it professional despite Lily's insistence that they needed a group hug. Claire compromised with individual hugs, a long, tight embrace with Lily, and a brief, careful one with Ethan that still managed to feel significant. "Friday," she said quietly, her breath warm against his ear. 7 o'clock. "There's a little Italian place in Westbrook, far enough from the office that we're unlikely to run into colleagues. I'll be there. And Ethan, thank you for this weekend, for taking a chance. Thank you for asking me to." The drive home was quiet, Lily dozing in the back seat while Ethan navigated familiar highways back toward their regular life. He thought about Monday morning, about walking into the office and seeing Claire in her natural habitat, all business and authority. Would he be able to look at her the same way? Would she be able to maintain her professional distance knowing what they'd shared? His phone buzzed at a red light. Another message from Claire's number. "I already miss you both." He typed back quickly. "Same. See you Friday." It was such a simple exchange, but it felt momentous. They'd crossed a line, stepped into new territory, and there was no map for where they were going. Just faith that the destination was worth the uncertain journey. When they got home, Lily helped him unpack. chattering about all her favorite moments from the weekend. The sandcastle, the kayaking, the seals, and always, woven through everything, mentions of Ms. Morgan. "Is she going to be our friend now?" Lily asked as Ethan tucked her into her own bed that night. "Like, can we see her outside of work stuff?" "Maybe," Ethan said carefully. "Would you like that?" "Yeah, she's nice, and she listens when I talk, like what I'm saying actually matters." "What you say always matters, Sweet Pea." "I know, but grown-ups don't always think so. Ms. Morgan does, though." After Lily fell asleep, Ethan sat in his living room staring at nothing, processing everything that had happened. In 72 hours, his entire world had tilted on its axis. He'd gone from safely isolated single father to a man tentatively reaching for connection with someone who could either complete his life or completely upend it. The responsible choice would be to pull back, to thank Clare for a nice weekend and then politely extract himself before anyone got hurt, to prioritize stability over possibility. But James Morrison's words kept echoing in his head. The most successful people aren't the ones who follow every rule perfectly. They're the ones who know which rules matter. What mattered was honesty. What mattered was putting Lily first. What mattered was being brave enough to try, even when the outcome was uncertain. His phone buzzed again. Claire, sending a photo. It was her wrist, the friendship bracelet Lily had made still tied there. "Wearing it to work tomorrow," the message read. "Let them wonder." Ethan smiled and sent back a simple heart emoji, then immediately wondered if that was too much, too fast. But Claire responded with one of her own, and he felt the fear ease slightly. They were doing this, really doing this. Taking a chance on something that defied logic and professionalism and every safe choice he'd made in the past 7 years. And for the first time in longer than he could remember, Ethan Brooks felt truly, terrifyingly, wonderfully alive. Monday morning arrived with the cruel efficiency of all Mondays, dragging Ethan from sleep at 5:30 when his alarm pierced the quiet darkness. He lay there for a moment, staring at the ceiling and trying to reconcile the man who'd held Clare Morgan's hand on a beach 3 days ago with the employee who would see her across a conference table in 4 hours. The weekend felt like a dream now, something that had happened to someone else. In the harsh light of a workday morning, with Lily needing breakfast and his inbox already pinging with urgent messages, the idea that he and the CEO of his company were attempting some kind of relationship seemed absurd. But then his phone buzzed with a text message. "First day back? Ready to be completely professional and appropriate?" He smiled despite his anxiety. "As ready as I'll ever be. You?" Terrified, but trying to remember why we decided this was worth it. We decided it was worth it because isolation was killing us slowly, and at least this way we get to feel alive while we panic. That's remarkably dark for 6 in the morning. I haven't had coffee yet. Give me an hour, and I'll be inspirational. I'll hold you to that. See you at the office, where I will ignore you professionally. I look forward to being professionally ignored. The exchange eased something in Ethan's chest, reminded him that Claire was as nervous about this as he was. They were in it together, fumbling through uncharted territory with nothing but good intentions and mounting feelings they hadn't quite named yet. Getting Lily ready for school was its usual controlled chaos. She couldn't find her homework, then couldn't decide between 2 different hair ribbons, then announced that she absolutely needed to bring her favorite rock to show and tell, despite the fact that show and tell was on Fridays, and today was Monday. "We'll save it for Friday," Ethan said, guiding her toward the door with the gentle insistence of a parent who'd learned to pick his battles. "But what if I forget by Friday? What if this rock is the most important thing I ever show and I miss my chance?" "Then we'll deal with that tragedy when Friday comes. Right now we need to get you to school and me to work." In the car, Lily was quieter than usual, staring out the window with an expression that Ethan had learned meant she was working up to asking something. "Daddy?" "Yes, Sweet Pea? Are you going to marry Miss Morgan?" Ethan nearly drove off the road. "What? Why would you ask that?" "Because you like her, I can tell. And she likes you. That's what happens in movies. People like each other and then they get married." "Real life is more complicated than movies, Lily." "But you do like her, right?" There was no point in lying to his daughter. She was too perceptive, too attuned to the emotional currents around her. "I do like her, very much. But liking someone and getting married are very different things. We're just getting to know each other better. So you're dating. It's complicated. Why? How did you explain professional ethics and power dynamics and the potential for career-ending conflicts of interest to a 7-year-old? Because Miss Morgan is my boss at work, and there are rules about that kind of thing. We have to be very careful about how we handle our friendship so that nobody thinks I'm getting special treatment or that Ms. Morgan is doing anything wrong. Lily absorbed this with the seriousness of a judge hearing testimony. That sounds hard. It is hard, but sometimes the things worth having are hard. Is Ms. Morgan worth it? Ethan glanced at his daughter in the rearview mirror, her small face so earnest and trusting. I think she might be, but I need you to understand something important, okay? Ms. Morgan and I are taking things very slowly. We're being friends first, and we're figuring out if we want to be more than friends. And nothing is more important to me than you. So if this doesn't work out, or if it gets too complicated, or if you're ever uncomfortable with any of it, you tell me. Deal? Deal. Can I still make her friendship bracelets? You can make her all the friendship bracelets you want. Good. Because I was thinking blue and silver for the next one. Those are sophisticated colors. Ethan had no idea where his 7-year-old had learned the word sophisticated, but he was grateful when they pulled up to the school and the conversation shifted to more immediate concerns like whether she'd remembered to pack her library book. The office felt different when Ethan walked in at 8:15. Everything looked the same gray carpets, same fluorescent lights, same motivational posters about teamwork and excellence that decorated the walls. But something fundamental had shifted, and he couldn't tell if it was the space or him. He made it to his desk without running into Claire, which felt like both a relief and a disappointment. His cubicle was exactly as he'd left it on Friday afternoon, neat and organized with a framed photo of Lily front and center. He logged into his computer and tried to focus on the Henderson analysis that was due by end of week, but his mind kept drifting. Was Claire already in her office? Was she thinking about him? Was she regretting the whole thing now that they were back in this context? Brooks, welcome back, man. How was the retreat? Brad appeared at his cubicle entrance, coffee in hand and looking far too cheerful for a Monday morning. Ethan felt his shoulders tense automatically. It was fine. Good team building. I bet. Saw you spent a lot of time with the boss lady. Building teams? There was something in Brad's tone, not quite accusatory but definitely insinuating, that made Ethan's jaw clench. I spent time with my daughter, actually. Miss Morgan was kind enough to include her in some activities. Right, the kid. That was cute, actually. Didn't know Morgan had a maternal side. She's a person, Brad. People have multiple sides. Whoa, defensive much? I'm just saying it was interesting to see her so human. Usually she's all business, you know? Ice queen in a power suit. But at the beach, she was almost likable. Ethan forced himself to keep his expression neutral, to not rise to the bait that Brad was clearly dangling. If you need something work-related, I'm happy to help. Otherwise, I've got the Henderson analysis to finish. Brad held up his hands in mock surrender. Just making conversation, man. Don't shoot the messenger. After he left, Ethan sat staring at his computer screen without seeing it. This was what they were going to face: speculation, gossip, people watching their every interaction and reading meaning into the smallest gesture. It made the decision to keep things quiet, to maintain professional boundaries at work, feel even more critical. His phone buzzed with an internal message through the company system. Henderson analysis meeting at 2 p.m. Conference room B. Please bring updated projections. CM. The message was perfectly professional, exactly the kind of thing Claire would send to any analyst working on a major project. But Ethan stared at the initials at the end, remembering how those same initials had signed off on much more personal messages over the weekend. He typed back a response that was equally professional. We'll be ready. Do you need the demographic breakdowns as well? Yes. All supporting data. Thank you. That was it. No hint of anything personal, no secret message hidden in corporate speak. Just boss and employee, exactly as it should be. Ethan tried to tell himself that this was good, that this was what they'd agreed to, but part of him had been hoping for something more, some acknowledgement of what they were to each other outside these walls. The morning crawled by with painful slowness. Ethan buried himself in spreadsheets and data analysis, losing himself in the numbers the way he'd learned to do when emotions got too complicated. Around 11, Sarah from HR stopped by his desk. "Hey, Ethan, got a minute?" His stomach dropped. Had someone complained about him and Claire? Had Brad said something to HR? "Sure. What's up?" "I'm updating emergency contacts for everyone post-retreat. You know, making sure we have current information. Just need to verify what we have on file for you." It was completely routine, nothing sinister, and Ethan felt foolish for his paranoia. He provided the information Sarah needed, confirmed his sister's contact details, and watched her move on to the next cubicle. This was going to be his life now, every interaction analyzed for hidden meaning, every routine request triggering anxiety that someone had discovered the secret he and Claire were keeping. At 1:30, Ethan gathered his materials for the Henderson meeting. He'd spent extra time making sure his analysis was flawless, that his projections were conservative but justified, that every assumption was documented and defendable. He couldn't afford to give anyone reason to think Claire was going easy on him. Conference room B was empty when he arrived early, and he took the opportunity to set up his laptop and organize his notes. Other analysts started trickling in: Jennifer from finance, Marcus from operations, Tom from marketing. They all greeted him casually, no hint that they suspected anything unusual. Claire arrived exactly at 2 o'clock, commanding attention the moment she walked through the door. She wore a charcoal gray suit that Ethan had seen before, her hair pulled back in that severe bun, her expression all business. This was Clare Morgan, CEO, and there was no trace of the woman who'd built sandcastles and confessed her loneliness on a beach. "Let's get started," she said, taking her seat at the head of the table. Her eyes passed over Ethan without pausing, without any hint of recognition beyond the professional. "Brooks, you're leading the analysis. Walk us through your findings." Ethan stood and began his presentation, falling into the familiar rhythm of data and interpretation. He was good at this, had always been good at translating complex information into clear recommendations. But he was hyper-aware of Claire's presence, of the way she listened with that intense focus he'd always admired. She asked sharp questions, pushed back on some of his assumptions, demanded clarification on his methodology. To anyone watching, she was being exactly as demanding as she always was, holding him to the same high standards she held everyone to. But Ethan knew her well enough now to see the tells, the way she touched the friendship bracelet on her wrist when she was thinking, the slight softening of her expression when he made a particularly strong point, the way her eyes lingered on him just a fraction of a second too long when he finished speaking. "Strong work," she said when he concluded. "I have some concerns about the Q4 projections, but overall this is exactly what I needed. Jennifer, I want you to run secondary validation on the financial models. Marcus, check the operational assumptions. We'll reconvene Thursday with revised numbers." The meeting dispersed, people gathering their materials and filing out. Ethan was packing up his laptop when Claire spoke again. "Brooks, hold back a minute. I have some additional questions." His heart stuttered, but he kept his expression neutral as the last person left and the door clicked shut. They were alone. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Claire's professional mask slipped, just slightly, and he saw the woman underneath. "That was torture," she said quietly. "Which part?" "All of it. Sitting 10 feet away from you and pretending I didn't want to touch you. Acting like you're just another analyst when you're—" She trailed off, shaking her head. "This is going to be harder than I thought. We agreed to keep it professional at work. I know we did, and we should. We have to. But knowing that intellectually and actually doing it are two very different things." Ethan glanced at the door, making sure it was fully closed, that no one was lingering in the hallway. "Friday?" he said. "We just have to make it to Friday." "Friday feels like a lifetime from now." "I know, but we can do this. We have to do this, or everyone will know. And then it gets complicated in ways we're not ready for." Claire nodded, straightening her shoulders and rebuilding her professional armor. "You're right. I'm being foolish. It's just been a long time since I felt this way, and I'm not handling it with my usual composure. For what it's worth, I'm not handling it much better. Brad already made some comments this morning about us spending time together at the retreat." Her expression sharpened. "What kind of comments?" "Nothing specific, just insinuations. Calling you likable, which he seemed to think was noteworthy. Brad's an idiot. Agreed, but he's an idiot who apparently pays attention. Then we need to be even more careful. Claire moved toward the door, putting physical distance between them. Friday, 7 o'clock. Don't be late. Wouldn't dream of it. She paused with her hand on the door handle. And Ethan, your analysis was exceptional. I would have said that regardless of anything personal between us, but I wanted you to know I meant it. Then she was gone, leaving Ethan alone in the conference room with his heart hammering and the ghost of her perfume in the air. The rest of the week unfolded in a similar pattern. During the day, they were consummate professionals, their interactions limited to necessary work communication. Claire was, if anything, harder on Ethan than before, questioning his work more aggressively and holding him to impossible standards that he somehow managed to meet. But in the evenings, after Lily was asleep, they texted. Long conversations that stretched past midnight, sharing pieces of themselves in the safety of distance and digital communication. Claire told him about her childhood, about growing up in a coastal town with parents who'd divorced when she was 12, about how she'd learned early to be self-sufficient, to not need anyone, because needing people meant being disappointed when they left. Ethan shared his own history, the relationship with Lily's mother that had been passionate but ultimately incompatible, the terror of those first months alone with an infant, the slow building of a life that was stable if lonely. They traded stories like currency, building understanding through shared vulnerability. Wednesday night, Claire sent him a photo. It was her hand, the friendship bracelet still tied around her wrist, now slightly faded from wear. Lily asked if people commented on it, Ethan typed back. What did you tell them? That a friend made it for me. Which is true. A 7-year-old friend. I didn't specify the friend's age. Let them wonder. Thursday, Ethan's sister called during his lunch break. So, Rachel said without preamble, are you going to tell me what happened at this retreat, or do I have to guess? Nothing happened. Team building, kayaking, the usual corporate bonding nonsense. Lily mentioned someone named Ms. Morgan approximately 47 times when I talked to her yesterday. Want to explain that? Ethan closed his office door, ensuring privacy. It's complicated. It's always complicated with you. Is this Ms. Morgan the reason you sound different? I don't sound different. Yes, you do. You sound less defeated. Less like you're just going through the motions, so either you won the lottery or you met someone. Rachel had always been able to read him too easily, a talent that was both comforting and infuriating. I might have met someone. Maybe. It's very early and very complicated, and I'm not ready to talk about it yet. But you like her. I really like her. And Lily likes her? Lily adores her, which is part of why I'm terrified. Rachel was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice was gentle. Ethan, you've been alone for 7 years. You've built an entire life around being safe and stable for Lily, and that's admirable. But you're allowed to want something for yourself too. You're allowed to take a risk, even if it scares you. What if it doesn't work out? What if Lily gets hurt? What if it does work out? What if you're teaching Lily that it's okay to be brave, to reach for happiness even when it's scary? That's a valuable lesson too. After they hung up, Ethan sat in his closed office thinking about bravery and risk and what he was modeling for his daughter. He'd spent so long prioritizing safety that he'd forgotten courage had value too. Friday arrived with the weight of anticipation. Ethan had arranged for his sister to watch Lily overnight, telling his daughter it was just a sleepover at Aunt Rachel's. Lily had been thrilled, completely unsuspicious of any ulterior motive. He left work at 5, went home to shower and change, and found himself standing in front of his closet at 6:15, trying to decide what to wear for a date with his boss. Too casual suggested he wasn't taking it seriously. Too formal made it seem like he was trying too hard. He settled on dark jeans and a button-down shirt, then changed his mind 3 times before forcing himself to stop. The Italian restaurant Claire had chosen was in Westbrook, a small town about 30 minutes from the office, far enough to avoid colleagues, close enough to not feel like they were fleeing the state. Ethan arrived 10 minutes early and sat in his car, gathering his courage. His phone buzzed. I'm here, in the back corner booth, trying not to be nervous and failing spectacularly. The message made him smile. He wasn't alone in this anxiety. The restaurant was dimly lit, intimate without being pretentious. Ethan spotted Claire immediately, sitting in a booth near the back, just as she'd said. She'd changed from her work clothes into a simple black dress, her hair down around her shoulders, and the sight of her made his breath catch. "Hi," he said, sliding into the booth across from her. "Hi yourself. You look nice. You look beautiful." She blushed, actually blushed, and Ethan felt some of his nervousness ease. They were both just people, trying to figure out if what they felt was real. The waiter appeared with menus and wine suggestions. They ordered a bottle of red to share, and then they were alone again, face to face without the buffer of work or Lily or beach activities. "I've been thinking about this all week," Claire admitted, trying to remember how dating works. "It's been a long time." "Same. I think the last actual date I went on was 9 years ago, and it obviously didn't end well. So we're both rusty. Catastrophically rusty." They smiled at each other, and some of the tension dissolved. "Tell me something I don't know about you," Claire said. "Something that's not in your employee file or that didn't come up in our weekend conversations." Ethan thought about it. "I wanted to be a teacher once. Before Lily, before I needed the salary and benefits of the corporate world. I wanted to teach high school math, help kids understand that numbers could be beautiful." "Why didn't you?" "Couldn't afford it. Teachers don't make enough to support a family alone, and I needed stability more than I needed passion." "Do you regret it?" "Sometimes. But then I think about the life I've built for Lily, the opportunities I can give her because of my salary, and I think I made the right choice. Not the choice I wanted, but the right one." Claire reached across the table and took his hand, the first time they'd touched all week. "I think you would have been an amazing teacher. You're patient, you explain things clearly, and you genuinely care about people understanding. Maybe someday, when Lily's older, you could teach part-time. Share that gift." The idea had never occurred to him, that passions deferred weren't necessarily passions dead, that there might be a future where he could reclaim pieces of the life he'd set aside. "Your turn," he said. "Something I don't know." "I'm afraid of being happy," Claire said quietly. "Every time something good happens, I wait for it to fall apart. I sabotage things before they can hurt me. I've done it in relationships, in friendships, even in work situations where I was getting too comfortable. I create distance as a defensive mechanism." "Are you doing that now? With us?" "I'm trying not to. But the instinct is there, whispering that this is too good, that it can't last, that I should end it before you do." Ethan tightened his grip on her hand. "I'm not going anywhere, not unless you ask me to leave." "Promise?" "Promise. I'm all in here, Claire. Terrified, yes. Unsure of how we make this work. Absolutely. But committed to trying." The waiter returned with their wine, and they ordered food without really paying attention to the menu. After he left, Claire said, "We need to talk about the logistics, the practical reality of what we're attempting." "Okay. If this becomes serious, and I think we both feel it heading that direction, we'll need to file a formal relationship disclosure with HR. It's company policy for any relationships between employees at different hierarchical levels." "I know. I read the policy handbook last night." Claire's eyebrows rose. "You read the employee handbook?" "The section on workplace relationships, yes. I needed to understand exactly what we were dealing with." "And it's doable, but it requires transparency. We'd need to disclose the relationship. You'd need to recuse yourself from any decisions directly affecting my employment, and ideally I'd transfer to a different department or reporting structure to eliminate the direct conflict of interest." You'd be willing to transfer?" "If it meant we could be together without complications? Yes. My work is good, Claire. I could succeed in any department. The specific role matters less than the life I'm building outside of work." She looked at him with something like wonder. "You've really thought this through?" "I told you, I can't be impulsive. I need to plan, to understand the consequences, to make sure Lily's stability isn't compromised." "And you think we can do this? Make it work despite all the complications?" Ethan looked at her, really looked at her, saw the vulnerability beneath the competence, the loneliness she'd admitted to, the courage it took for someone who'd built walls to let him inside them. "I think we can try. I think we're both smart enough and committed enough to navigate the challenges. But I need to know you want this as much as I do. Because I'm not putting Lily through meeting someone, getting attached, only to have that person decide it's too complicated and walk away. I want this, Claire said without hesitation. I want you. I want to be part of Lily's life, if she'll have me. I want to try building something real instead of hiding behind my career and pretending that's enough. I'm scared to death, but I want it. Then we try. Carefully, thoughtfully, but we try. Their food arrived and they ate slowly, talking about everything and nothing. Claire told him about her college years, about the law degree she'd earned but never used because she'd fallen into corporate strategy instead. Ethan shared stories about Lily's early years, the hilarious disasters and small triumphs of single parenthood. They talked about practical things too, how to introduce a new relationship into Lily's life without overwhelming her, how to maintain work boundaries while building personal connection, when to file the formal disclosure with HR. We should wait at least a few weeks, Claire said. Make sure this is really something before we involve the company officially. Agreed. Maybe after a month? That gives us time to see if this works outside the artificial environment of a beach retreat. A month, that's reasonable. They were splitting dessert, tiramisu that was almost too rich, when Claire said, "Can I ask you something personal?" Always. Why did you say yes to all of this? You had every reason to keep things professional, to protect yourself and Lily from complications. What made you willing to take the risk? Ethan set down his fork, considering the question seriously. Honestly, you did. The way you saw me, not just as an employee or a single parent, but as a whole person with wants and needs beyond my responsibilities. The way you looked at Lily, with genuine affection instead of polite tolerance. The way you admitted your own loneliness instead of pretending to have it all together. You made me feel like maybe I'd been settling for half a life when I could have a whole one. Claire's eyes were bright with unshed tears. That's the most beautiful thing anyone's ever said to me. It's the truth. They lingered over coffee, neither wanting the evening to end. Finally, around 10, Claire said, "I should probably get going. Early morning tomorrow." "Yeah, me too. Well, not too early. Lily's with my sister until tomorrow afternoon." "Oh." Something shifted in Claire's expression. "So you have the evening free?" "I do." "Would you want to, I don't know, take a walk?" "I'm not ready to say goodnight yet." They ended up walking along the Westbrook waterfront, a quiet path that ran beside the river. It was late enough that they were mostly alone, just the occasional jogger or dog walker passing by. Claire took his hand as they walked, and the simple gesture felt profound. "I forgot how nice this is," she said, "just walking with someone, existing together without needing to perform or produce and achieve anything. The concept of being instead of doing." Exactly. They found a bench overlooking the water and sat, watching moonlight ripple across the surface. Ethan put his arm around Claire's shoulders, and she leaned into him with a sigh that sounded like relief. "Thank you for tonight," she said, "for making me believe this could work. Thank you for taking the first step, for being brave enough to say how you felt on that beach. I almost didn't. I almost convinced myself it was too risky, too complicated." "What changed your mind?" "Lily, actually. Watching you with her, seeing that love and dedication. It made me realize I'd been using fear as an excuse to avoid living. If you could be brave enough to raise a child alone, to build a good life despite the challenges, then I could be brave enough to admit I wanted more than professional success." They sat in comfortable silence, content to just be together. Eventually, Claire shivered slightly in the evening breeze, and Ethan gave her his jacket. "I should really get you home before you freeze," he said. "I suppose. Though I'd rather stay here." "Me too, but tomorrow's another day. More opportunities." They walked back to their cars, hands linked, both reluctant to let go. At her car, Claire turned to face him. "1 month," she said. "We give this 1 month to see if it's real. If it is, we file the disclosure and deal with whatever comes." 1 month, Ethan agreed. She rose on her toes and kissed him, soft and sweet and full of promise. It was their first kiss beyond that moment on the beach, and it felt like a new beginning. "Good night, Ethan." "Good night, Claire." He waited until she drove away before getting in his own car, sitting there for a moment and processing everything. They'd made a plan, set boundaries, committed to trying despite all the reasonable objections. And for the first time in 7 years, Ethan Brooks felt like he was living rather than just surviving. The month that followed their dinner date became a study in careful balance, a delicate dance between professional distance and growing intimacy that required constant vigilance and occasional courage. Ethan found himself living two parallel lives that somehow needed to eventually converge into one coherent whole. At the office, he and Claire maintained their professional boundaries with almost painful precision. Their interactions were limited to necessary work communications. Their meetings focused solely on projects and deliverables. If anything, Claire was harder on him than she'd been before, pushing back on his analyses with sharper questions and demanding revisions that made him work late into several evenings. To any observer, they were simply CEO and analyst, their relationship defined entirely by organizational charts and quarterly objectives. But outside those walls, something entirely different was growing. They saw each other twice a week, always in towns far enough from the office to avoid accidental encounters with colleagues. Sometimes they had dinner, talking for hours over wine and pasta about everything from childhood dreams to current fears. Other times they took long walks, exploring hiking trails and waterfronts, content to exist in comfortable silence, broken only by observations about the weather or the landscape. Claire met Lily officially for the second time on a Saturday afternoon 3 weeks after their first date, joining them at a children's museum that Lily had been begging to visit. Ethan had been nervous about it, worried that the dynamic would feel forced or awkward, but his concerns dissolved the moment Claire crouched down to Lily's level in the museum's entrance. "I've been looking forward to this all week," Claire said, and the honesty in her voice made Lily's face light up. "Really? Even though museums are kind of boring for grown-ups?" "Museums are never boring when you're with someone who sees them properly. And I suspect you see things very properly." They'd spent 4 hours exploring exhibits, Claire entering fully into Lily's world of wonder and curiosity. She didn't talk down to his daughter or treat the museum visit as an obligation. Instead, she engaged completely, asking questions that made Lily think, offering observations that expanded her understanding, being present in a way that made Ethan's chest tight with emotion. "She's good with her," Rachel observed when Ethan told her about it later. "That's not something you can fake." "I know," which makes this both easier and more terrifying. Why terrifying? Because Lily's getting attached, really attached, and if this doesn't work out, stop catastrophizing and just enjoy what you're building. You deserve this, Ethan. Happiness isn't something you have to earn through suffering first. But the fear remained, a low hum of anxiety beneath every moment of joy. Each time Claire and Lily laughed together, each time his daughter asked when they could see Miss Morgan again, Ethan felt the stakes rising. This wasn't just about him anymore. Whatever happened between him and Claire would affect his daughter, and that responsibility weighed heavier than any professional complication. The turning point came 3.5 weeks into their month-long trial period. Ethan was working late on a Thursday evening, most of the office already emptied for the day, when Claire appeared at his cubicle entrance. "Working late?" she asked, her tone carefully professional despite the empty office. "Henderson follow-up. Want to get it done before tomorrow's deadline." She glanced around, confirming they were alone, then stepped into his cubicle. "Can we talk? Somewhere private?" They ended up in her office, the door closed and the blinds drawn against the windows that looked out over the main workspace. Claire sat on the edge of her desk rather than behind it, a deliberate choice that eliminated the physical barrier between them. "I've been thinking about our timeline," she said without preamble. "About waiting the full month before filing the disclosure?" Ethan's stomach tightened. "You want to end things early?" "No, the opposite actually. I want to file the disclosure now. I don't want to wait anymore." "Claire, we agreed." "I know what we agreed. But I've spent 3 weeks trying to be professional while everything in me is screaming that this is right, that you're right, and I'm tired of pretending that we need more time to be sure when I already am sure." She stood and crossed to where he sat, taking his hands in hers. "I'm in love with you, Ethan. I probably have been since that first day on the beach when you let me play with your daughter and didn't make me feel like I was intruding. And I'm in love with Lily, with the way she sees the world and the person she's becoming. I don't need another week to know that I want this to be permanent. The words hung in the air between them, weighted with significance and vulnerability. Ethan felt his heart hammering against his ribs, felt the careful walls he'd maintained starting to crumble. "I love you too," he said, and saying it out loud felt like jumping off a cliff and discovering he could fly. "I've been trying to be cautious, to protect myself and Lily, but the truth is I fell for you somewhere between sandcastles and scavenger hunts, and I can't imagine going back to a life where you're not in it." Claire's eyes filled with tears, and she pulled him to his feet, wrapping her arms around him in a fierce embrace. "So we do this? We file the disclosure and deal with whatever comes? We do this, but we do it right. We go to HR together tomorrow, we're completely transparent about the timeline, and we accept whatever restructuring is necessary to eliminate conflicts of interest. I'll transfer you to the Singapore division," Claire said immediately. "It's been needing a senior analyst, and it would put you under different management entirely. Different reporting structure, different approval chains. No possibility of favoritism or ethical concerns. Singapore is a promotion. It's a lateral move with additional responsibilities. You'd be perfect for it, and you know it. Your work speaks for itself, Ethan. This isn't favoritism. This is putting the right person in the right role." He pulled back slightly to look at her. "People will still talk. They'll say you promoted your boyfriend, that the relationship influenced the decision. Let them talk. We'll have documented everything properly. The disclosure will be filed before the transfer is announced. James already knows about us and approves. Anyone who has a problem can take it up with HR, and they'll find that every policy was followed to the letter." "You've really thought this through." "I've thought about nothing else for 3 weeks. I want this, Ethan. I want you and Lily in my life permanently. I want to be able to have dinner together without driving 30 miles to avoid colleagues. I want to introduce you as my partner, not hide what we are to each other. I want to build something real." Ethan kissed her then, deep and sure and full of promise. When they broke apart, both slightly breathless, he said, "Okay, we file tomorrow. We do this right." "We do this right," Claire agreed. They spent another hour in her office planning the logistics. They'd go to HR first thing in the morning, file the relationship disclosure with full transparency about when it had started. Claire would immediately recuse herself from any decisions affecting Ethan's employment. The Singapore transfer would be announced next week, giving time for the disclosure to be processed and any concerns to be addressed. They'd handle this exactly according to policy, leaving no room for accusations of impropriety. "What about Lily?" Claire asked as they were finishing. "Have you told her yet? About us being more than friends?" "Not yet. I wanted to be sure first to know this was really happening before I said anything that would get her hopes up. Can I be there? When you tell her?" The question, and the vulnerability behind it, made Ethan's chest tight. "I'd like that. Maybe this weekend? We could do something together, just the three of us, and explain it in a way that makes sense to her." "I'd love that." They left the office separately, maintaining discretion for one last night. Tomorrow everything would change, would become official and public. But tonight, driving home through darkened streets, Ethan felt lighter than he had in years. Friday morning arrived with crystalline clarity, the kind of autumn day that felt full of possibility. Ethan dropped Lily at school, kissed her forehead, and tried not to let his nervousness show. "You seem happy, Daddy," she observed with her usual perceptiveness. "I am happy, sweet pea, really happy." "Is it because of Ms. Morgan?" "Partially, but mostly because I have you." "That's mushy, but nice." At the office, he met Claire in the lobby at 8:30 as planned. She wore her usual professional armor, sharp suit, hair pulled back, expression composed. But when their eyes met, he saw the same nervous excitement he felt. "Ready?" she asked. "Ready." They walked to HR together, their presence clearly unexpected by the receptionist who scrambled to let them into the department head's office. Margaret Chen had been with the company for 15 years, a no-nonsense woman in her 50s who'd seen every variation of workplace drama imaginable. "Ms. Morgan, Mr. Brooks, this is unexpected. Please sit." They sat side by side in the chairs facing Margaret's desk. Claire had insisted that they do this together, that there be no question of hierarchy or power dynamics influencing the disclosure. We're here to file a formal relationship disclosure, Claire said without preamble. As required by company policy for relationships between employees at different hierarchical levels. Margaret's eyebrows rose fractionally, the only indication of surprise. I see. When did this relationship begin? We first acknowledged mutual interest during the company retreat 4 weeks ago, Ethan said, appreciating that Claire had let him speak. We've been seeing each other outside of work since then, and we decided it was time to formalize the disclosure and address any necessary restructuring. And you're both here voluntarily? Mr. Brooks, you understand you're under no obligation or pressure to disclose this relationship? I understand completely. This is my choice, made freely without any coercion or influence from Ms. Morgan's position. Margaret made notes on her computer, her expression neutral. Ms. Morgan, are you aware that this disclosure will require you to recuse yourself from any employment decisions affecting Mr. Brooks? I am. I've already prepared documentation recusing myself from his performance reviews, compensation decisions, and any other matters that could constitute a conflict of interest. Additionally, we're proposing a transfer that would eliminate the direct reporting relationship entirely. What kind of transfer? The Singapore division needs a senior analyst. Mr. Brooks has the qualifications and experience for the role. It would put him under different management, different reporting structure, completely separate from my direct oversight. Margaret looked at Ethan. And you're agreeable to this transfer? I am. It's a good opportunity, and it resolves the conflict of interest concerns. The optics of this could be challenging, Margaret said carefully. A CEO dating an employee, then that employee receiving a promotion. It's a lateral move with expanded responsibilities, Claire interrupted, and the transfer won't be announced until after this disclosure is processed. We're doing everything by the book, Margaret. Full transparency, immediate recusal, structural changes to eliminate conflicts. What more can we do? Margaret was quiet for a long moment, studying them both. Then she said, Honestly, nothing. You're handling this exactly right. Most people try to hide relationships or minimize them. You're being proactive and transparent. I appreciate that. She pulled up several forms on her computer and began walking them through the disclosure process. There were questions about the nature of their relationship, its duration, whether there was any exchange of benefits or favorable treatment. They answered everything honestly, holding nothing back. I'll need to speak with James Morrison, Margaret said as they were finishing. Get his formal approval for the transfer and confirm there are no concerns at the executive level. James already knows, Claire said. He's been supportive. Good. That makes this easier. I'll process the disclosure today and schedule the transfer announcement for next week. In the meantime, Ms. Morgan, you're officially recused from any matters involving Mr. Brooks. Any questions or concerns about his work go through me or through his current department head. They thanked Margaret and left her office, not speaking until they were in the elevator heading back to their respective floors. That went well, Ethan said. Better than I expected. Margaret's fair. She won't let office politics influence how this is handled. What about everyone else? Brad and Sarah and all the people who are going to have opinions about this? Claire looked at him, her expression serious. People are going to talk. Some of them will be supportive, some will speculate about favoritism, some will make it into drama because that's what people do. But we know the truth. We know we've done this right. And that has to be enough. It is enough. The elevator doors opened on Ethan's floor. Before he stepped out, Claire caught his hand briefly. Tomorrow. Talk to Lily? Tomorrow. Come over around 2? I'll be there. The news spread through the office with impressive speed. By Monday afternoon, it was clear that everyone knew about the disclosure, though the details had gotten predictably distorted through the gossip chain. Ethan heard variations ranging from they've been secretly dating for months to he got her pregnant and she's covering for him to she's just using him for some kind of social experiment. He ignored most of it, keeping his head down and focusing on his work. A few people made comments. Brad, unsurprisingly, had opinions about office romances and mixing business with pleasure. But most of his colleagues were either genuinely supportive or professional enough to keep their thoughts private. Sarah from HR stopped by his desk on Tuesday. I heard the news, just wanted to say congratulations. Claire's a good person, despite what some people think. She deserves to be happy. Thank you. That means a lot. Also, for what it's worth, I think you handled the disclosure exactly right. Going to HR together, being transparent, accepting the transfer. It shows integrity. Word of his impending transfer to Singapore spread quickly after that, generating a whole new wave of speculation. But this time, Ethan found he didn't care as much. He had Claire, he had a plan, and most importantly, he had the knowledge that they were building something real. The conversation with Lily happened on Saturday afternoon, as planned. Claire arrived at 2 o'clock carrying a bakery box that Lily immediately recognized. Cupcakes. Did you bring cupcakes? I brought cupcakes. I thought we could have a little celebration. What are we celebrating? Claire looked at Ethan, who nodded. They decided to do this together, to present it as a united decision rather than something imposed on Lily. Actually, we wanted to talk to you about something important, Ethan said, settling on the couch and patting the space beside him. Come sit with us? Lily climbed up between them, her expression curious but not concerned. Am I in trouble? Not at all. This is good news, actually, but it's big news, and we want to make sure you understand it. Okay? Ethan glanced at Claire, drawing strength from her presence. You know how you asked me if I was going to marry Miss Morgan? Yeah, you said it was complicated. Well, it's less complicated now. Miss Morgan and I have been spending time together, getting to know each other better, and we really like each other. A lot. Like boyfriend-girlfriend? Lily's eyes went wide. Like boyfriend-girlfriend, Claire confirmed. Your dad and I are dating, which means we want to spend more time together, as a family, if that's okay with you. Lily looked between them, processing. So you're going to be my mom? The question hung in the air, weighted with hope and vulnerability that made Ethan's throat tight. That's not quite how it works, Sweet Pea, he said gently. Miss Morgan and I are dating, which means we're seeing if we want to be together permanently. If we do, and if we decide to get married someday, then yes, she would become part of our family in a permanent way. But that's something that happens slowly, over time, as we all get to know each other better. I already know her. She's nice and she listens and she makes good sandcastles. Those are all true things, Claire said, smiling, but there's a difference between being friends and being family. Your dad and I want to make sure we're doing this right, taking the time to build something strong, which means you get to be part of that process. If you're ever uncomfortable or have questions or just need to talk about how you're feeling, you can always tell us. Okay? Lily nodded seriously. Okay. Can I still call you Miss Morgan? You can call me whatever feels comfortable. Ms. Morgan, Claire, whatever you like. What about Mom? Claire's eyes filled with tears, and she looked at Ethan helplessly. He put his arm around his daughter, pulling her close. Maybe we save that for later, he suggested, when things are more permanent. For now, what if you call her Claire? That way it's friendly but not confusing. Okay, Claire. Lily tested the name, then smiled. I like it. Can we have cupcakes now? The ease with which she accepted the news was both touching and slightly terrifying. Ethan had worried that Lily might be resistant or confused, but instead she seemed genuinely excited. As they ate cupcakes and Claire explained that she'd be spending more time with them, dinners, weekend activities, maybe even some sleepovers eventually, Lily peppered her with questions. Will you teach me to make sandwiches the fancy way? Can we go to the science museum? Do you like chocolate ice cream or vanilla? What's your favorite color? Claire answered each question with the same serious attention she gave to board presentations, and watching them together, Ethan felt something settle in his chest. This could work. This was working. After Lily ran off to play in a room, content with the new arrangement, Claire and Ethan sat together on the couch. That went better than I expected, she said. She really likes you. I think she's been hoping for this since the retreat. Smart kid. The smartest. But Claire, we need to be careful. She's excited now, but if this doesn't work out for some reason, it's going to devastate her. Claire took his hand, threading their fingers together. I know, which is why I need you to believe me when I say I'm in this for the long term. I'm not going to suddenly decide this is too hard or too complicated and walk away. I've spent 10 years building walls, and you and Lily are worth tearing them all down. Promise? I promise. I love you, Ethan. And I love your daughter. I'm not going anywhere. The weeks that followed settled into a new rhythm. Claire became a regular presence in their lives, joining them for dinners and weekend activities, slowly integrating herself into their routines. She learned Lily's favorite foods and bedtime preferences, figured out how to braid hair through trial and error, and became genuinely invested in the day-to-day details of their life. At work, Ethan transitioned into his new role with the Singapore division. The transfer was handled smoothly, with clear documentation showing it was based on his qualifications rather than his relationship with Claire. He reported to a different manager now, someone who'd never worked directly with Claire, eliminating any appearance of conflict. Some people still gossiped, of course. Brad made pointed comments about sleeping your way to the top that Ethan ignored with the dignity of someone who knew the truth. But mostly, the office moved on. There were always new dramas, new relationships, new scandals to occupy people's attention. 2 months after they'd filed the disclosure, Claire suggested dinner with James Morrison and his wife. "He wants to get to know you outside of work," she explained. "See the person I'm building a life with." "Is this a test?" "More like a blessing. James has been a mentor to me for years. His approval matters." The dinner was at an upscale steakhouse, the kind of place where the wine list had its own sommelier and the bread was served warm with 3 types of butter. Ethan was nervous, but James put him at ease immediately. "Heard good things about your work in Singapore," James said as they settled into their table. "Chen says you're exceeding expectations." "I'm enjoying the challenges. Different market dynamics than domestic operations." "Different, yes, but you're adapting well. That's what good analysts do. They adjust to new contexts without losing their fundamental strengths." James's wife, Patricia, was warm and engaging, asking about Lily and seeming genuinely interested in the answers. As the evening progressed, Ethan relaxed, realizing this wasn't an interrogation, but an invitation. James and Patricia weren't just Claire's mentors and friends. They were becoming his as well. Over dessert, James said, "Can I give you some advice, professional and personal?" "Of course." "Don't let anyone make you feel like you haven't earned your success. You're good at what you do, Ethan. The transfer to Singapore was justified by your work, not your relationship. But people will always speculate, especially when workplace romances are involved. The key is knowing your own worth and not letting external noise shake that confidence." "Thank you, sir. I appreciate that." "And on the personal side, take care of her." James nodded toward Claire, who was deep in conversation with Patricia. "She's tougher than she looks, but she's also been alone for too long. You and your daughter are good for her. I can see it in the way she's changed these past months. More present, more engaged with life outside the office. That's worth protecting." "I intend to," Ethan said. "She's worth protecting." Winter settled over the city, bringing shorter days and the promise of holidays. Lily's school had a winter concert in mid-December, and when Ethan mentioned it casually to Claire, she immediately asked if she could attend. "You don't have to," he said. "It's just a bunch of 7-year-olds singing holiday songs off-key." "I want to, if that's okay with you and Lily." "But..." The concert was exactly as chaotic as Ethan had predicted. Children forgetting lyrics, one boy picking his nose throughout the entire performance. A minor collision when 2 kids tried to occupy the same spot on the risers. But Lily sang with fierce concentration, her small voice occasionally audible above the general cacophony. Afterward, as they waited in the crowded hallway for Lily to emerge from the classroom, Claire slipped her hand into Ethan's. "Thank you for letting me be part of this. Thank you for wanting to be part of it." When Lily finally appeared, still wearing her construction paper reindeer antlers, she ran straight to Claire. "Did you see me? Did I do good?" "You were perfect," Claire said, crouching down to her level. "The best singer in the whole concert." "Daddy says you have to say that because you like me." "I do like you, but I also mean it." Watching them together, Ethan felt the last of his reservations dissolve. This was his family now, not the traditional structure he'd once imagined, but something equally valid and infinitely precious. That night, after Lily was asleep, Ethan and Claire sat on the couch, drinking hot chocolate and talking about the future. "I've been thinking about next steps," Claire said carefully, "about where this is going." Ethan's heart stuttered. "What kind of next steps?" "The permanent kind. The kind that involve commitment and shared lives and all the things that terrify me but that I want anyway." She set down her mug and turned to face him fully. I want to marry you, Ethan. Not today, not next week, but eventually. I want to be Lily's stepmother, to build a life with both of you. I want to wake up next to you every morning and go to sleep knowing you're there. I want all of it. That sounds like a proposal. It's not. Not yet. Because I want to make sure you want the same things, that I'm not moving too fast or pushing for something you're not ready for. Ethan pulled her closer, wrapping his arms around her. I want all of it too. The marriage, the shared life, the future. But you're right that we should take our time. Make sure Lily's comfortable with each step, that we're building something sustainable rather than rushing because it feels good. So we're engaged to be engaged. Something like that. Committed to the trajectory, even if the timeline is flexible. I can live with that. They sat in comfortable silence, Claire's head on Ethan's shoulder, both of them watching the lights from the Christmas tree Lily had insisted on decorating in early November. Outside, snow was beginning to fall, the first significant accumulation of the season. I never thought I'd have this, Claire said quietly. I'd convinced myself that career success was enough, that wanting more was greedy or unrealistic. And then you appeared with your daughter and your quiet integrity and your willingness to take risks despite your fear. And suddenly I wanted everything I'd told myself I couldn't have. I was doing the same thing, convincing myself that being a good father was enough, that wanting companionship or love was selfish when I should be focused entirely on Lily. But you showed me that I could be a good father and still want something for myself, that the two weren't mutually exclusive. We're good for each other. We really are. Christmas came and went in a blur of wrapping paper and sugar cookies, and Lily's delighted squeals over presents. Claire spent Christmas Eve with them, staying through dinner and gift opening, becoming part of their traditions in a way that felt natural rather than forced. New Year's Eve, they left Lily with Rachel and went to a quiet restaurant overlooking the water. As midnight approached, they walked down to the waterfront, watching fireworks bloom across the sky in cascading colors. New year, new beginning, Claire said as the clock struck 12. New chapter in an ongoing story, Ethan corrected, pulling her close for a kiss that tasted like champagne and promise. In February, 6 months after the beach retreat that had started everything, they made it official. Not the engagement, that would come later, on Lily's 8th birthday when Claire asked for her permission first, but the living arrangements. Claire moved into Ethan's house, the three of them becoming a permanent unit rather than separate lives that occasionally intersected. The adjustment wasn't seamless. There were disagreements about household responsibilities and parenting approaches and how to organize the bathroom cabinet. There were moments when Claire's independence clashed with Ethan's need for structure, when Lily tested boundaries to see if Claire would really stay. But they worked through it with patience and communication and the fundamental commitment they'd made to each other. They went to family therapy to make sure Lily had space to process the changes. They established routines that honored everyone's needs. They built something real and messy and imperfect and absolutely right. At work, Ethan continued to excel in his role, his success speaking for itself. The gossip eventually died down, replaced by grudging respect for someone who'd navigated a complicated situation with integrity. Claire remained as demanding and brilliant as ever, her leadership strengthened rather than compromised by her personal happiness. On a Saturday morning in late spring, almost a year after that first beach retreat, Ethan woke to find Claire and Lily already up, their voices carrying from the kitchen. He lay there for a moment, listening to them plan their day, something about a farmer's market, and maybe ice cream after, and felt profound gratitude for this life he'd been brave enough to choose. He found them in the kitchen, Lily sitting on the counter while Claire made pancakes, both of them covered in flour and laughing about something. "Morning," he said, and they both turned to him with matching smiles. "Daddy, Claire's teaching me to flip pancakes." "I can see that. You're both wearing most of the batter." "The batter jumped," Lily explained seriously. "It wasn't our fault." "The batter is very adventurous," Claire agreed, winking at Ethan over Lily's head. They ate breakfast together, the three of them crowded around the small kitchen table, planning their weekend and bickering good-naturedly about whether chocolate chips belonged in pancakes. It was ordinary and domestic, and everything Ethan had told himself he didn't need. Later, after Lily ran outside to play, Claire pulled him aside. "I've been thinking about the engagement," she said, "about asking Lily for her blessing." "Yeah? I want to do it soon, maybe on her birthday next month, but I want to make sure you're ready, that this is what you want." Ethan cupped her face in his hands, looking into the eyes of the woman who'd taken a chance on him, who'd seen past his responsibilities to the person underneath, who'd loved his daughter as fiercely as she loved him. "This is exactly what I want. You're exactly what I want. Let's do it." "Yeah?" "Yeah. Let's build this life together. Officially, permanently, completely." Claire's smile was radiant, transforming her face into something almost incandescent with joy. "Okay then, we're really doing this. We're really doing this." They sealed it with a kiss, deep and sure and full of promise. Outside, they could hear Lily singing to herself as she played, her voice carrying through the open window like a blessing. Ethan thought about that day on the beach, about the moment when Clare had whispered, "You don't have to look away," and everything had started to shift. He'd been so scared then, so convinced that protecting himself and Lily meant keeping everyone else at a distance. But he'd been wrong. Protection wasn't about walls and isolation. It was about choosing wisely, loving bravely, and trusting that the right people would stay. Clare had stayed. Through disclosure processes and office gossip, through family adjustments and relationship challenges, through every moment of uncertainty and fear. She'd stayed because she'd chosen them, and they'd chosen her, and that choice had been brave enough to build something lasting. A year ago, Ethan Brooks had been a single father maintaining careful distance from his boss, convinced that safety meant solitude. Now he was a man building a future with the woman he loved and the daughter they both adored. The journey hadn't been simple or easy, but it had been worth every complicated, terrifying, beautiful moment. And as he stood in his kitchen with Clare in his arms and Lily's laughter floating through the window, Ethan realized that this was what happiness looked like. Not perfect or uncomplicated, but real and chosen and infinitely precious. They'd taken a chance on each other when every logical reason said they shouldn't. They'd been brave enough to tear down walls and build bridges instead. And in doing so, they'd created something that neither of them could have built alone. A family, a future, a life worth living. The cage of responsibility had become a home. The loneliness had transformed into love. And all it had taken was the courage to say yes when everything else screamed no. As Clare pulled away to check on the pancakes and Ethan went to call Lily in for breakfast, he felt the story of who they'd been shifting into the story of who they were becoming. Not an ending, but a beginning. Not a destination, but a journey they'd chosen to take together. And that, he thought, was exactly how it should be.